Welcome to Living 4D with Chek. Today's guest is Allison Pelot. Alison helps women become their most vibrant self, to feel strong, capable, and confident, and to create the body they love by teaching them how to build a foundational nutrition and movement practice that's just right for them and based on their body's unique physiology. She's also the host of the Integrate Yourself podcast.
Well, welcome to Living 4D with Chek. I've got a great, exciting, interesting, and deep woman to discuss the dualities of womanhood today with. Welcome, Allison Pelot.
Thank you, Paul. I'm so happy to be here. I'm honored. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. We met, it was a long time ago, and you reminded me in a previous chat that it was at a conference where I was lecturing at in Georgia, quite some time ago. How many years ago was that?
Oh my God. I think it was, I want to say 2005. So yeah, it was a while back.
Yeah. And, I remembered meeting you once you told me about it. I had a very specific memory. For some reason, I felt like I was sitting at a table or something, and you came up to me. It was just a vision that I had. And at that time, you described how you were lost in your life and just needed some kind of support or reinforcement. And I did what I normally do, which is read your energy field and check in with your soul, and told you that you're going to be successful in your life. And you had a positive emotional response to that, which was lovely. And since then, you've gone through HLC 1, HLC 2, HLC 3, and you and I have shared a client and had discussions about related things over the years. And we're going to talk about your journey from being a gymnast to a mother with struggling with the challenges of womanhood that ultimately led you to being a highly skilled, empathic, and compassionate therapist that really understands people, women, and the challenges of life. So I'm excited to share this journey and the wisdom that you carry within you today. So to start with, you really had quite a potent and turbulent journey. And as I've shared in the introduction, we met early in your life when you were lost, and you've come a long way since that day. To set the stage for our discussion on the dualities of womanhood, can you give us an overview of your life and the challenges and successes that you've experienced?
Absolutely. I think, and remembering that day, Paul, I was so lost. Like, I did not have any idea who I was. I was a stay-at-home mom at that time. I wasn't working, so I loved being a mom, actually, and that was a huge desire for me. I really wanted to be a mom, and it caused me to slow down, which is the first time I'd ever done that before in my life. So with that, there was a joy in it, but there was also an anxiety around it, like, because when there was nothing that I was doing externally so much to define who I was, like gymnastics for so long, or being a student, or having a job, I had a challenge there. I had a loss of identity, and so I was just a mom. I was, not that being a mom is not important, and of course, I feel like it was one of the most important, or is one of the most important jobs I've ever had to do and wanted to do. But I also didn't know who I was. I completely lost it, and so when I saw you that day and you put your hand on my hand, you put your hand over one hand, you shook my hand, and then you put the other hand over my other hand. And it was like a shock to my system. I was like, I just got this jolt, like it was like lightning or something that just shot through me and just made me feel for the first time in a very long time. And I think it was just that those emotions were really deep, deep down. And then hearing you say that I'm going to be successful, such loving words from a person I didn't even know, it just brought me to tears. And so that was a very pivotal point in my life, because it really woke me up from a deep sleep in a way. So at that point, I was like, oh my God, like I want to learn more about this. I want to, learn more about how to manage myself, how to develop these life skills to where I don't feel totally helpless. I'm not a victim. I can kind of uh, create responsibility around my life and move forward that way. So, and also just I felt like there was a passion that had been ignited within me that just was like, oh, okay, I can do something for myself. I don't have to be doing things for everybody else all the time. I don't have to, that doesn't define who I am.
Right.
So that was a big day for me. And it did change a lot of things. It changed a lot of things with my relationship. Um, when I got your book, How to Move, Eat, and Be Healthy, it was literally life changing too. I just totally, and that was before I met you. And um, it just changed my whole perspective on what healthy is. I before had learned about eating through gymnastics and as an athlete, which isn't really healthy. It's just for keeping your weight down. And then you do eat junk food still. So, it's not really, to me, it was, I was eating like Splenda and all these low sugar, like crappy artificial sweeteners and thinking that was healthy. And then I read your book and I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea that there was anything like that. Food was different. There was organic food and there was conventional food. So that was mind blowing at the time. Of course, now we know so much more about it. But before that, like that information was not out there. And
No, it wasn't.
yeah, um, so that was really incredible. And then um, I realized that I really wanted to start teaching people that. But before we go down that road, some challenges I think in my life, and really one of the biggest challenge was when I was that comes to mind that relates to what we're talking about today, which is womanhood. Is when I was 15, around the time where I was starting my menstrual cycle, and which is a rite of excuse me, which is a rite of passage for women for sure. I think it's one of the first rites of passage because uh, you're transitioning from a girl to a woman, literally, physically. But and so from that point on, everything in your life changes, and there is a need to prepare for that. But we don't really teach women that in our society. So um, I was just given information about, how to handle my period. And it was very minimal information and just, keep going. Like basically, let's figure out how to do this so you can wear a leotard and keep doing gymnastics and not let anything show,
Yeah.
and nothing else was really talked about. Now, I don't want to blame my mom because she did the best she could. I love her so much. She had her own struggles. And so, I've worked through a lot of that kind of thing. But I just felt lost. I was like, I don't know what's happening to me. I don't feel like myself anymore. And then shortly after that, my parents got a divorce. And then I literally felt like the floor was coming out from under me. I felt like my whole foundation was gone and I didn't know what to do. So, I felt like a shit show at the time. It was just,
Well, yeah, it's the sad part of it is how common both of the things you've just mentioned. The lack of education for young women about what's happening to them, what it means to be a woman, and how to manage that, and how to prepare for the rest of your life. And then there's the other issues of the toxicity of tampons and all the stuff that's caused tremendous problems for females that still really rarely ever makes it into the mainstream media.
right.
And the average marriage today only lasts 2.5 years. And so that's, quite a debacle because the number of people that get divorces when they have young kids is really, really high. And my mother left my father when I was very young, probably 3, I think. But I still got to see him intermittently enough that I didn't have that kind of sense of that he was totally gone, and I was too young to really know what was happening. But when my mother started being intimate with another man, me and my brother and my sister went through quite a painful, scary experience because, we all thought, why is this man touching my mother? And there was no explanation. And then next thing you know, he's telling us what to do. Then we're being physically abused by him. And our little hearts were like, where's our daddy? Where's our daddy? Why isn't he protecting us? And what's happening? And we couldn't get any clear answers or explanations out of my mother. And, so it's a very painful experience that, as you very well know, can leave a very deep scar in a person that can affect every part of their life for the rest of their life. And so, we'll get into some of these things as we go, but, I'm totally intimate with everything you're talking about, and countless is the number of my patients and clients that I've found these types of issues to be at the very core of very serious health challenges in their life and relationship challenges at every age.
I don't doubt that at all. I think when I look back on my life, I see how, and I know I'm not the only one, I see how the suppression of the feminine is really detrimental to health and in women, especially because, I don't know. I know, I look back, I don't blame anybody, but I just think it's our society that we try to suppress anything that is going to inconvenience us, like having a period or, if you start having sex, we need to put you on birth control, and that's what happened to me. So it's not celebrated when you're a woman and you have sex for the first time. Your dad isn't really happy about that, Um, so I have 2 boys now, so I'll never really know, as a mom what that feels like. But it's different with boys, it's very different. When my son had sex for the first time, it was a very different experience than, how we responded to him that I got responded to in my house. And I was in trouble, and so it's just, we have to start realizing how we are doing this here. This is creating a lot of havoc in people's health. The way we're not honoring these rites of passage for us, turning from the girl to the woman, and then really helping young girls understand the power that they have once that happens. I mean, you are going to be looked at by men differently, and you got to understand a little bit about how that all works and how you want to harness that energy, and so those are the things that I'm just now learning a lot about now at the age of 46, so but if I had been able to learn it then, if there was somebody who could have taught me that would have been incredible. And I think now we are coming to that point where these things are more out there. There's more information about how to help young women. But, as we'll probably get into today, there's also a little bit of a dichotomy of like, now women also are trying to be like men. So, there's we kind of get to play all roles now in some ways, and it's really fast. It's really incredible. But at the same time, I think we still need to know how the feminine and masculine work and how we can balance those energies out. But we first need to know, from teachers who can teach us more about the feminine energy, how that works and how we can keep that part healthy.
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, just listening to you talk and everything we've shared so far, when my mother had 3 kids by the time she was 18. So there's an example of someone who didn't really probably truly grasp the power of what it means to start menstruating and how dangerous that can be. And the next thing my father was a competitive dancer and a drag racer and hung out with lots of women. And the next thing you know, he's off running around having sex with his dance partners, and she's left all alone and not getting any financial support. And ultimately, had to raise 3 kids all by herself, working 2 8-hour-a-day back-to-back waitressing jobs to pay a babysitter to look after us. And even though I don't have a lot of memory of those early years, I do know that I failed the 3rd grade and I couldn't read. And I remember being very depressed as a child and feeling like the world was very confusing and wondering why my mother was never there. And whenever I would see her, she was exhausted. And in my many meditations, healing meditations, and doing various techniques that I was working on to heal myself, but also to learn how they work to help others heal, I would have visions of my mother coming home just exhausted and there was just nothing left of her. And as a little boy, all I could think of is, how can I help her? How can I help her? And I just felt paralyzed by it. And I think it ultimately created what would be now today called a learning disorder. And that failure of reading in the 3rd grade created such a disdain, such a dislike of reading, because it was probably the first time in my life I felt really judged, like something was wrong with me. And it led to me not reading a book cover to cover ever until I was 21 years of age. I hated schoolwork. I hated reading. And it wasn't until I found something that truly interested me that I read a book cover to cover. And that was Nutrition, A Holistic Approach by Rudolph Ballantyne, MD.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So the Great Spirit works in some strange ways. That's one thing I've learned.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
So your childhood has had both some challenges in it, such as parents getting a divorce and some abuse by a male that set the stage for growth and development challenges, which you've shared with me in our previous discussions, and a less common challenge of being an athlete that had to find their way into life beyond athletics. So I'm wondering if you can share what happened to you through these experiences and what you've had to work through to make meaning out of it all.
Yeah, I don't recall the abuse by the male. I'm not sure what you
didn't you tell me that somebody pulled your swimsuit down, or?
Oh, yeah, that was like when I was 5. Okay. Yeah, that was a long, long time ago. Yeah. So I was, so when I was younger, I was very open and very like I had a very powerful energy to me. I just was me, and I was, people would call, like, for example, when I was a gymnast, when I was around 5 years old, I was so little, but they'd call me Big A because I had such a powerful energy at such a young age. I just had a big personality. And so, I think that at some point we had a friend of the family who just basically did something very inappropriate and, thought it was a joke, kind of a jokey thing, but it was kind of creepy. And so I was 5 at the time, and he like put a piece of ice down the back of my swimsuit, which is very inappropriate to do for somebody. You're kind of looking into their bathing suit and putting the ice down there. And I just thought, it hadn't occurred to me until later in life that that's what pissed me off when I was 5 years old so much. And I was really after that moment, I just was pissed. I was pissed at the world. I didn't want to show my body anymore. I was really wanting to cover up because I felt violated. And so it was just that one little incident that I felt like someone overstepped, an adult who, really, whether it was innocent or not, it wasn't appropriate. So that was that was kind of what happened in that scenario. And that, to me, I had to really kind of go back to that time and heal that part, because I had I had some resentment and some anger around that, and that had built up over those years, for sure, because I think it translated a little bit into, like, I've always been really comfortable with my body. And especially when I was younger, I was just like free. And so then, that incident afterwards kind of took that away from me in some ways. And so that was what happened with that situation.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you've been following my work for any length of time at all, you know how important organic food and organic farming is, not only for the health of the soil and to protect all the little beings in nature from toxic chemicals and throwing nature completely out of balance, which directly affects us, but also for our own health and well-being. We all need nutrient-dense foods for body-mind well-being. And I'm so excited about the Organifi line. Organifi is a product line made of certified organic source materials, and I've checked this out personally. I can guarantee you that. One of my favorites that I've recently tried is their red juice, which has acai and cordyceps infused into it. It's a super, super tasty product, and it revitalizes skin cells, supports your metabolism, has antioxidants in it, age-fighting nutrients, helps mental clarity. It's got a lovely natural sweet flavor. And something that I found really interesting, if you go to Organifi.com and look up the red juice, they show you a price per serving comparison against Palm Wonderful, Red Bull, Gatorade, and a Starbucks latte. And Organifi red juice is actually significantly more cost-effective considering not only the price, but the density of the nutrients in it. I think you'll be really amazed with this red juice, along with all their other products. If you go to Organifi.com, Organifi.com, and as you're checking out, use the code lowercase CHEK20 all together, you will get a 20% discount on your Organifi purchases. I'm super excited to share this company. I've tested their products, my family's tested their products, and we're all behind them. And I know you're going to be satisfied because this is the real deal. This is true nutrition. Check it out. As you check out, CHEK20 to get your discount. Thanks for joining me. Hope you to continue to enjoy the podcast. And if you love it, share it with as many people as you can.
If I could interject a little bit there, what that brings up for me as a man and as a therapist, it's really interesting to see that at that young age that you had a sense of right and wrong that may not have ever been explained to you, but was somehow inherently in your own awareness. For example, if your father had done that and it was a joke, it would have probably been a very different experience, but because it was another man, it triggered something in you. So I'm wondering, obviously issues of sexual abuse with children are rampant today. Basil Vanderklok's book, I think it's Your Body Keeps the Score, if I remember the title right, gives you the statistics on physical, emotional, mental, and sexual abuse amongst children. And when I read that book, I was actually shocked that they were as high as they are. And so when I think what I would like to draw out of you as a woman is, do you think that that's a common experience for girls that are that young to have this sense of invasion when people might be doing, young men or men might be doing these things that they don't think are really invasive, but potentially could be something that, just like you, has a very profound effect on the psyche of that young girl?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would think in this day and time it'd be different because I think people are a little bit more apprehensive to just go up and touch a child, or do something that's going to be questionable, just because of, like you said, all the things coming out about sexual abuse with children. I think that some of the work that I have done with John McMullen and Journeys of Wisdom has brought to my attention that, some people need to really, probably in most situations, we really need to ask for an invitation to touch someone that we don't know, or that we feel like maybe apprehensive. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with consent or that whole conversation between two people who are having sexual relations and those kind of things, or going on a date. This just has mostly to do with between adult and a child, so I always ask, permission when it's not my children, and or I have space, and I give them space, because I think sometimes we tend to think of kids as not like they don't have autonomy,
Yes.
and so I but they do, and it's just because they're smaller and they don't they're not as developed as adults, they still have autonomy, and so you have to have respect for them, uh, and give them space, and ask permission. I think that's really important, because they're people too, and you can't just go in and just, even if it's something loving, like going in for a hug or something, if it's a stranger, it can be very overwhelming to kids sometimes. So I think that's probably, the best way to go about it if you're an adult and you want to, be totally respectful. But I don't think that was really going on when I was younger. And people would always, I felt like after, and it may have just, it's kind of hard to put it all together, but I feel like it was after that moment where I just didn't want people to come up and hug me anymore and touch me. I was just like, no, this is, I just had felt violated. And I was like, this doesn't feel right to me anymore, And so I think, that we have to go about these things with a little bit more consideration, and realize that kids need to have respect too. I think for the most part, we're there. I feel like it goes in more of the other direction sometimes, but but I think as far as that topic goes, that's where we could start.
Yeah, it's interesting, having studied a lot of information on what science says about what a child's mind is capable of, what they can perceive, um, all these things that they say at this stage of brain development, they don't have a sense of this or a sense of that.
Yeah.
Being a father again now and having a 3-year-old, I've had conversations with Angie and Penny going, these guys are really out of the loop, man. They don't really realize how much more intuitive and aware even little kids at 3 years old are than science says they are. So I think part of the problem is we've got such an academic approach to children and to sex and to most aspects of life. It completely cuts out the unrational, feeling, intuitive nature that is really alive in even a child, because they don't have so much mental baggage in the way, or all these programmed beliefs and behaviors. So they're able to see and feel and know things that most adults don't even pick up on.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. And what came to mind when you said that was that kids, they don't know at that age, at a young age, how to really express themselves emotionally, or
Yes.
but they do know how to feel. They're really tuned into their bodies, so again, considering that, like, they're probably more in tune with their bodies than most adults, so but the problem is they just don't know how to express themselves.
Yeah, I also think that it's the same situation if it had happened to you as a boy. Say you were a boy, not a girl, and a woman did that to you. I don't think it would have nearly the same effect. I think that little girls already have the seeds of knowing the importance of protecting their sexuality or sexual access, because that's inherently part of the psyche of a woman. Whereas I think little boys probably would have felt very, very different in that situation.
I think that could definitely be true. Yeah, and you get the energy of protection from your father, because he's supposed to protect you, and so there is that underlying, like, energy of, like, okay, I have to protect myself, and it's probably, my guess is it comes from generations of that, of women feeling like they need to protect themselves.
Well, my buddy Laird Hamilton, he's got a special medicine for those issues. He put all his girls in jujitsu, and one of them's, he tells me she's like taking down 6 foot tall guys, and she's like
Oh my
fit
God.
16 and kicking their asses. So one solution for the girls is teach them martial arts at an early age so they can put the guy in a wrist lock and stick the ice cube in his mouth.
That's a great solution. I like that.
So tell me about your journey through gymnastics and the challenge you had with that sort of expression of yourself coming to an end. I don't think there's that many women out there that are really high-level athletes compared to non-athletes, but I think it's still a legitimate transition, and that's why it's probably worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a great run at gymnastics. I competed from the age of 5 until I think around 22. And I went to college and did gymnastics for 3 years and got a scholarship and all of that. So I started from the age of 5 in gymnastics, and I went on till the age of 22 and did it in college for 3 years, competed in college and got a scholarship. And so that was my goal. And I accomplished that. I didn't finish out the 4th year because I just felt like I wanted to end it on a good year and felt like I had had enough and I was ready to move on with my life. So it really became my identity. And I don't know if I really kept doing it because I really loved it after a while, or just because I felt like that was who I was, But with gymnastics, you have to eventually stop doing it. You can't do gymnastics forever like you can with other sports. And so, and you literally, like, I would not be able to get up on the balance beam and do what I used to do at all. I would, first of all, mentally not be able to do it, and physically definitely not be able to do it. So, so there has to be a cutoff at some point for all gymnasts. Even though now we have GMB, all these programs that can teach people gymnastics, there's still a cutoff at that level. So for me, since I had been doing it all my life, and that was really all I knew, and the level at which I was competing, we were traveling every weekend to a different city, and it was my life. It was my life, and I didn't have much of a social life. I kind of felt like socially I was a little bit, I didn't really have the skills to have a social life because I hadn't been around people but my gymnastics team, and didn't really know how to do it. And so, I feel like I really missed out on a lot. So when I got to high school, I started really burning the candle at both ends. I started drinking a lot, and I started to have lots of sex, and then that spilled over into college as well. And it was another shit show for me, and I just didn't feel. I just felt like I needed to detach really heavily during that time, because I just couldn't handle myself. I didn't know what to do. I just was kind of at the point where I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know even if I liked myself. So, you know, I went through high school and college pretty insecure, and definitely had a drinking problem at that time. I way overdid it, and probably I guess that is why my digestion was so bad by the time I hit my 20s, and so when I transitioned at 22 and decided I don't want to go to school. I was going to school at Radford University and had gotten a college scholarship there, but mostly I was there for pre-physical therapy, but mostly I was partying a lot and just kind of getting by, and then doing gymnastics. So I decided, okay, I need to get serious. So I decided to transfer to Georgia State University and thought I would apply to the physical therapy school out there and go full-time with physical therapy. So I got out there and decided I didn't want to do physical therapy. I actually wanted to get into exercise science. And so I did that. I graduated after 3 more years of college. And so, I was a gymnast, then I was a student. And then when I finished being a student, it was like, who am I? I'm not
Yeah.
doing anything anymore. And it was like a death of self. And so, um, it was a real crisis. And I had no idea what to do. I was crying for no reason. Things were really setting me off. I was getting triggered left and right. And I didn't feel like I could function.
It's
And yeah,
it's kind of interesting because you're actually describing the same symptoms as a midlife crisis.
yeah, I feel like I've been through quite a few in my life.
Research shows that today it's common for people to have a midlife crisis as early as 18 years of age. And so as you're talking and sharing this, what rises up in me is to ask you, what are some of the symptoms that mothers and fathers should be looking for in their children or teenagers that are facing these kinds of transition challenges?
Well, I just interviewed Deshaun Fauntleroy recently, and he runs this program called Sports Mastery. And what he does is he actually teaches young athletes how to build life skills and actually the skills for even running a business and just managing your life. And I think if more parents could get involved with helping their children with these kinds of skills as they get older, because I just don't think that. I think a lot of parents expect these things to be taught in school, but you really do have to uh, sit down with your kids and figure out what's going on and find out what kind of skills they need to learn, because it's not that mind-boggling. It's really just learning the skills to be an adult, to become responsible for yourself, to create accountability, consistency, some kind of foundation with which to navigate life, navigate relationships, and those kinds of things, and even finances. So those are the things that I wish I had some kind of schooling in, or some kind of teacher to teach me those kinds of things. But I think what I've learned throughout the years is just through personal growth, different things here and there. And I've picked up on how to do this. And finally, now I'm really, really feeling like I'm at the stage where I am able to really share it with everybody else and teach everybody else how to do that. But I think you have to know, every kid needs to know themselves and really become self-assured. And I see more and more kids that are like that actually these days, including my own kids. And it makes me feel really very hopeful towards the future, because I think that if we have that self-assured part of ourselves, that knows what kind of the part that knows where you stand, no matter where anybody else stands, right? Nobody else can really influence you. You are,
Yeah.
so you got that. You have that strong sense of self.
Yeah,
That I think that's so important.
that's called autonomy.
Yeah, yeah,
And interestingly, research on weightlifting and its effects on females showed one of the primary psychological effects of women entering into a regular weightlifting program was an increased sense of autonomy, which I think is just beautiful.
absolutely. And that's what I love. That's why I love teaching what I do in the gym, because it does create that autonomy, and especially for women who feel helpless. I was in that situation after a bad injury, and I really got into a state of learned helplessness. And I hired a trainer, and he helped me get out of that. Sometimes you just have to have someone help you get out of that and start to push you to believe in yourself again, and to know that you can handle that and that you're strong and capable.
Yeah.
As a listener of Living 4D with Paul Chek, we know you're dedicated to mastery, mastering your health, mastering your profession, mastering parenting, mastering your dream. And mastery was exactly what Paul and Gavin Jennings had in mind when they created the Chek Academy. It's about creating true masters in resolving deep health challenges and masters of optimal human performance. So, how do you reach this mastery? Students of the Chek Academy learn the essential components of what it means to be a human being and to have a body. They learn to see how diet, lifestyle, exercise, and mental emotional factors interact with one another and need to be addressed. And they are trained to use a massive toolkit of assessments to provide them with deep insights into their clients. In short, you'll learn Paul Chek's entire system of holistic health from A to Z. And from the first moment of the Academy, you'll practice what you learn in your own life. That's the key to real mastery and personal growth. The Academy also supports each and every student with mentorships, faculty who are themselves mastered in their fields, and a passionate community of fellow students and practitioners. That means you'll have all the support you need to implement what you learn in your life and in your practice. And you'll achieve all this for an affordable monthly fee. If you have the commitment, passion, and dedication it takes to become a true master of holistic health coaching, then we invite you to apply to the Chek Academy now. Visit us online at chekacademy.com. Now, back to Living 4D with Paul Chek.
There's two things that I've recognized quite a bit, because as you can imagine, in my career of 35 years of working with athletes, I've had many injured athletes that come to me, and they're often in specialized high schools where the entire school, or a lot of them are in private schools that are schools for elite athletes, just like we have schools for kids that are specialty schools for kids with artistic abilities or musical abilities, or I've even heard of schools for kids that are highly advanced in their understanding and ability to use electronics. And I've had kids that were in elite athlete programs. I was a therapist for the U.S. Olympic figure skating development team, and was called in to do evaluations on the entire team because so many of them had injuries and health problems. And one of the things that I see is that a lot of parents, unfortunately, and I have empathy, but I think what I'm about to share has some negative side effects, and that is that they get kids involved in athletic programs in order to babysit them, so that they basically drop them off, leave them, and a lot of these kids will spend hours at a hockey rink or hours in wrestling class, or then going into the gym, and so really they use athletic programs as sort of an extension babysitting program, like they often use schools, or they use video games and video game arcades. And so what I see happening is there's the child actually develops its sense of self and an extended family through the athletic environment, but they don't really learn the kinds of things that they can only learn from their mother and father. The other thing I've seen, which really has broken my heart, I remember one particular experience. I won't mention this person's name because this person's now very, very famous and on television commercials and all sorts of stuff. But this young man's mother brought him to me with quite a bad knee injury, and he was, in pretty rough shape. And I said to her, this guy's going to have to go into at least 3 months of rehabilitation, or this knee is probably going to end up being on an operating table, but it doesn't need to be. It can be effectively rehabbed. At the time, I think he was 16 or 17. And she just had a cow. She's like, no, he's got a commercial he's got to film with Budweiser. And, this is a $30,000 paycheck. And I need you to do whatever you can do to get him ready for that event this weekend. Well, this event required him to do quite an exotic athletic. I can't say too much because it'll let the cat out of the bag about who this is, and I need to protect his privacy and the mother's privacy. But it was a dangerous stunt that he was going to do, and it could have ended his entire career. And this guy went on to become, a multiple-time gold medal winner in the Olympics. But what I have seen over and over again is children being used as a meal ticket, and the parents are pushing them through elite hockey programs. I just had an interview yesterday with a famous bodybuilder, Ben Pekulski. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's, top 10 Mr. Olympia and, major, 280 pounds, heavy on the steroids, super massive guy. But, and we talked about some of these things, but, the research shows that 13% of Pop Warner boys in football are on steroids that have been given to them by their brother or their big brother or father, because the family thinks they have a chance of becoming a professional football player. And over again, I've seen parents trying to put all their eggs in this, sort of using their child as an investment, like a retirement plan. And I've seen the psychological damage it does to children. And I've seen how many hours they spend, 8 hours a day at a skating rink, or, hours and hours and hours and hours of football training and watching films like they're a professional football player. And I think it's quite traumatic to children. And it's both of these things are problematic. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that as a mother.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. And I remember when my kids were younger, and it was even starting at a young age, like in soccer, the soccer people were really intense, already.
Yes.
Like when their kids are so young, and I'm like, why can't they just have fun? Like there's a time to learn about competition, and that's development mentally. There's a right time for that. But you really have to let kids have fun and enjoy it. And again, like we talked about earlier, the autonomy and all of it. Like, what do the kids want? What do they really want? Do they even know what they want? Or are they just doing what they think their parents want them to do? So that's the problem. And what's going to happen as a result of that, the kids could become successful. In many cases, they do. And maybe that's something that they really want to happen. Maybe the kids really want that. And some of them probably do. But I think that a lot of times you get people like, you think about, unfortunately, like someone like Tanya Harding, she didn't have a very stable foundational life, like sometimes then they miss those life skills, and then they don't know how to do life. And to me, that's not successful. That's not a successful way to go about it. And you're not, as a parent, you're not a successful parent if you can't help your kids with life.
Well, look at Michael Jackson and the Jackson family, and
right.
Look at Mike Tyson.
Yeah, it's
that's exactly what happens when kids are not given the family support and the freedom to be who they truly want to be, or at the rate that they want to become that person. And one of the things that I find just astonishing is anytime I go to like a kid's little league baseball game or soccer game or hockey game, the parents are absolutely out of control, yelling and screaming at the kid, criticizing the child for missing the puck or missing the catch, and the parents get into arguments and fights and yelling at the other kid's parents or the referee. And it's such a terrible example by the parents for their children.
Yeah, absolutely. They're as a parent, you should be a role model for your kids. The reality of it is that, and of course we make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect, but we do need to, if we do make mistakes, we need to talk about it, and then, also really be more aware of the example we're setting for the kids, and if kids are going to be learning from you, they're going to be doing what you're doing. And believe me, I've made so many mistakes as a parent. There's so many things that I did that were not, perfect at all, but I think that if you can always go back and just try to if you just do your best, that's really all you need to do, really. Just do your best, and you're human. So if you make a mistake, use it as a learning opportunity for your kids.
I think part of the problem is, yes, we all make mistakes. My God, I made a lot of mistakes. I became a father when I just turned 18, and my son's going to be 40 this summer. But with Mana, I'm see, he came when I was 54, I think. I'll be 58 this August. And Zoe will be born in July. And I think I'm really only in my 50s really mature enough to be an effective parent. And with Paul Jr., I was very intense and I was very, outcome oriented. Get this job done, study this, you've got to learn this, more like a drill sergeant than a father. But I think what I'm leading to here is it's from a parenting perspective, and why this is relevant is because of your challenge as a kid that we're talking about. I think a lot of adults have forgotten the importance and what it means to be a child, and how we've gotten caught in this academic grading system and comparing and contrasting. My kid's got A's, yours doesn't, or my kid's a great athlete, yours aren't. And it really sets a huge polarity up in the mental emotional field of the child, because they begin to identify themselves by the parents and teachers' judgments of themselves. An example is, I use art therapy in a lot of my workshops. And in HLC3, I used to use mandala therapy, and countless is the number of times in HLC training and PPS workshops that I would initiate an art therapy exercise, and I would have people who literally would go into a state of fear or a state of panic and could not even put a pencil onto a piece of paper. And the most common reason was because when they were a child and they were doing art in some class in elementary school or junior high school, their art got criticized and they felt belittled. And that broken child still is afraid that the teacher is going to reprimand them because their art's not good enough, or that it's not going to look good enough compared to other people. And as a child, I hated all that because I was a very kinesthetic child. I wasn't a mathematical, logical learner. And, kind of the sad issue here is that mathematical, logical learners, according to Howard Gardner's research, are only 5 to 8% of the human population. Mm-hmm. The visual learners are about 38%. The next highest group is the auditory, and the third highest, or about 12 to 15%, if I remember the statistics right, are kinesthetic. And as a gymnast, you'd have been highly kinesthetic. And only 5 to 8% of children in school are naturally mathematical, logical learners, but 95% of all education at every level of our education system worldwide is conveyed through mathematical, logical education or learning style. So we're actually setting kids up for failure. And then we have all these grading systems and judgments that are labeled on them. And so that really not only sets the child up for a really challenging inner life, but it sets the parents up for having experiences with their children that they often don't understand, because they don't know why their kid's depressed, why their kid's anxious, why their kid's developing anxiety. And so it results in all these kids getting put on drugs and being labeled as dysfunctional with some diagnosis. And the parents often don't realize that this is actually a direct byproduct of the environment that the parents are either creating or supporting by sending them into these types of schooling environments, which really are not designed for the way a child grows and develops. And Steiner did extensive research into this and built the entire Waldorf school system to protect children from that, which is why I have Mana in a Waldorf school system. And I've had many parents bring their kids to me that are having all sorts of health and mental, emotional challenges. And every time I've ever been able to encourage them to get their kids into a Steiner school, I've had a 100% track record of those parents telling me it was a godsend and it radically changed their child, their family dynamics. And so, these are issues that are commonly overlooked, and they're relevant because mothers are usually the ones that have to spend most of the time dealing with the fallout from these kinds of challenges.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I think that suppression is a bitch, you just have to, you have to realize that. And I think sometimes the kids don't even realize it when they're going through it. They're depressed, but they don't know why. Because they just don't have any freedom. I think anybody if you don't have freedom in your life, you're going to be depressed, Um, and so, I think schools like the Waldorf school they're amazing. I almost put my oldest in a Waldorf school. At the time, we lived in Atlanta, and the school was super small, and they wanted to put him in a grade lower than he had already. So it just didn't work out. But I ended up putting my kids in schools that could give them the freedom that they needed to express themselves the way they want to express themselves. And so that seems to have worked out pretty well. And now they're at a high school that's very small, and it's a democratic school, so they are able to have freedom and have a say in things. But there is enough structure for them to be able to learn how to also, develop those life skills as well, but also learn how to creatively express themselves, which I think is really important. If we're always going through life, like I felt like, my parents were wonderful, and I think that my dad would always say, if you ever don't want to do gymnastics, please let me know. I think a big part of that was probably like, cause it was expensive, but he was just like, if you ever want to quit, it's totally fine with me. He was always very supportive of that. But I think for me, it was again, like I said earlier, it was my identity. It was who I kind of became. I didn't know what else to do. And so, I also really have always been real resilient. So I kind of just put up with a lot of stuff just because I can. And I'm learning now that isn't always necessary. Like, why do we put ourselves under this extra stress just because we can, But going back to what I think, needs to happen is just somehow, and I don't know how this would ever happen, but somehow give the kids a structure from where they can learn, but also some freedom within that to be able to learn how to express themselves, because that's really what it comes down to and that as an adult is what I've always been, working to learn is how can I express myself right now? Like because that's just so healing, to be able to do that in many different creative ways. And it's always different for me. It's always changing, but how can we teach our kids, how to do this? And how can we look at our kids and be like, oh, remember what it was like to be a kid? And isn't it in all of us that we want to be childlike to some extent? Why are we trying to make our kids like adults?
Well, I think, and I teach this in my HLC training program. I don't know if you remember any discussions on this, but it's something that I talk about a lot. And that's that we have to have a balance between the rational and the unrational, or the, what we can weigh and measure as an outcome and what we can't weigh and measure. You cannot weigh and measure love. You can't weigh and measure play. If it's genuine play, there is no outcome. It's who cares what the picture that you just drew looks like? Who cares if the sandcastle isn't perfect? Like these are the things that are ultimately what we have to have in us, or we become so programmed to measure our own sense of self and success by how the outcome is. How much money did we make? How good of a grade did we get? How beautiful was the art piece? How perfect does your clothing look? And this is inherently tied to a real problematic issue in people of all ages and children, which is the perfectionism, which is one of the primary causes of addiction. So yes. I think what we really need to do for all of us at every age is look carefully at our life and see, are we making time to do things that we enjoy, but we give ourselves permission not to weigh and measure the outcome? And I find that it takes quite a lot of training with my patients to get them into that place. And I do things like drumming, rattling, art, rock stacking, and a wide variety of things. And it's amazing to me how emotional they get when they tell me, oh, or I'll be out working with them stacking rocks and their stack will fall over and they'll just get right pissed off and, make fists and growl and like, God damn it, what the hell's wrong with these fucking rocks? And I'm like, well, they're just rocks and they're just enjoying the play. It's okay. It's only a rock stack. Don't worry about it. That's the fun. We just do it again. That's what we're here to do. In fact, my son, Mana, thinks knocking them down is more fun than building them,
Yes, of course. Yeah, and we have to, and that's one thing we can learn from our kids is how to play. I I think being an athlete doesn't really teach you how to play. Like it's a serious business, and so, and like you said, like the intangibles, things that we can't really put in a box, we can't really measure. Those are the things that really end up being most important as you get older. And you really always are putting that on the back burner, I find, when you're busy, 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 rushing, rushing, rushing. But when you look at it, when you really just, kind of get down to it, those are the things that matter most. And if you talk to someone who's dying, they're going to say that the relationships, love, did I have fun in my life?
Yeah,
Did I
exactly.
find joy in my life? Those are the things that matter most.
As the old saying goes, nobody dies wishing they'd worked more.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And work can be very satisfying if you're doing something that you love to do. And but again, you got to find the balance there.
Yeah. Well, how common do you feel such challenges are amongst women today? And how often do you find unresolved challenges of this nature in the etiology of a woman's body-mind challenges when they see you for help as a therapist?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that women are going against their own natural inclinations. And we're, again, overriding the urge to slow down at times. There is a rhythm, that we learn, that I've learned actually from being at women's gatherings, from going and learning from other women who know the feminine and can teach me that. And even, going into some of the goddess work, like you can really start to hone into um, all of the things that you can really get and reflect from that, and realize that we're not a lot of times practicing that feminine aspect of ourselves. Like we're not really honoring that. So, even so, it's like for the sake of, doing things for other people, not really knowing yourself enough to set really healthy boundaries, tolerating way more than maybe you should be in your life, not knowing what to say no to, uh, things that are really depleting our energy and, really running us into the ground, hurting our health, not getting sleep. Those are things that are definitely, I think, are a huge barrier because we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're trying to keep up with the men sometimes too, like with what's going on now. Women, it's a fascinating time because women can do it all. Like, and that's some, for me, has been, I think it's a curse and a blessing because I don't think it's a good time to try to do it all the time. I don't think that's a attribute at all. I think that there should be a rhythm to it. You can do some things sometimes, and some things there's a better time for others. So, for example, when you have a baby, like that's a time to slow down, and I know a lot of women continue to work. I tried to do it and I couldn't do it. I was like, it was too much. I said, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to stay at home and relax and enjoy this because this isn't going to happen again. So I think just really paying attention to our natural rhythms so that we can have hormonal balance and we don't override our need to nurture ourselves, to eat, and to get nourishment in the body. So I find that those are the challenges, really, like just even starting with handling their blood sugar properly during the day. And if you don't even have the wherewithal to slow down or the awareness around that, then that's a big problem, and so you have to start there. And even just starting with breathing, because a lot of times we're breathing very fast and kind of keeps us in that sympathetic mode, and it keeps us from being able to balance our pH and be able to digest things well, and it makes us anxious. many different reasons that could be, as you know, it could be unprocessed trauma. It could be, that we're just rushing through life. It could be many different things. But again, just starting there and identifying why you can't slow down. Why can't you? Why can't you take some time for yourself? Why can't you find the goodness in life, enjoy life? Why can't you set your boundaries? Why
Well,
can't
it really,
yeah.
excuse me, but I just want to say something while it's appropriate here. And that is everything you've just said goes right back to the inability to balance the rational, logical, outcome-oriented thinking of the male with the unbound play that's the true feminine nature. It's also interesting that not too long ago, Angie came home from a class, because at the Steiner School, they actually have classes for parents. And she was quite amazed at one of the things they taught them. And they said, parents on average should not play with their children because they don't know how to play, and they keep on judging the child's activities or telling that it's doing things wrong, like you're holding the saw wrong or you're using your truck wrong. And they said that they found that it's actually very detrimental to the child's psychological development. And then unless a parent actually has spent time learning to play and can be very much like a child, it should just watch and detach and not judge and make sure that the child is safe and do nothing else. And so when we have school teachers, and one of the best school systems ever developed by a guy who is clearly one of the most evolved human beings that ever walked this planet, telling the parents not to play with the kids because they screwed the kids up. Well, half of those kids are girls that end up becoming women that still don't know how to slow down and don't know how to do things that are relaxing and enjoyable, that don't have an outcome, that are just to relax and make themselves feel good and express their creativity.
Yeah. And I think that's everything. As I've gotten older, you begin to see that the things that really make you unique and make you who you are is that, how you express yourself, the energy that you're creating in your life, that your essence, it's not really what you do so much as like the other stuff, the intangible stuff, really, and how you feel about yourself,
Yeah. Well, Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. So ultimately what that means for all of us is if we don't have creative abilities, we just keep using the same thinking to solve the problem that created the problem.
Absolutely.
And that makes for a lot of relationship challenges and a lot of parenting challenges and a lot of self-esteem challenges.
Oh, absolutely. I think that you can't really, if you don't work your creative muscle, then you're never going to be able to figure out the, solutions to problems that come up. So I tell my clients, like, let's work our imaginary muscle. Just start by using your imagination, go outside the box and just think of something totally crazy that you would want or that you would like to happen. It doesn't have to, that was really hard for me at first because I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist. So I always felt like I needed to have things, very kind of in order and things that, I don't know, it was really hard. I couldn't believe it at first. I was like, why is it so hard for me to use my imagination to extend out past maybe something I feel like is realistic for me? And it was quite a thing to be able to see that in myself and then start practicing. And it's really fun, but at first you feel kind of blocked.
Yes, well, I actually had to remove the mandala therapy out of HLC3. Do you know why?
No, why?
Because part of the exercise was I would allow each person to come up on stage and just share what their mandala meant to them or what they were experiencing as they were going through this unbound play exercise of just expressing whatever wanted to rise up in them. And so many people went into a very deep emotional catharsis and began telling stories about how scary it was to use art and how much pain they had over judgment and how it reminded them of the fact that they'd lost their childhood and felt like they never learned to play or got to live, and that their whole life was always to meet somebody's demands or some objective. And it brought them right face to face with their soul loss, and were actually having a healing crisis on stage. And some of these people went into such deep crisis. I remember I had one woman that it took her about 5 hours to get her out of a total body catharsis where it looked like she was going into shock, and it was scaring the hell out of the people in the class. And of course, I knew it was happening, but it stopped me from being able to get through the teaching objectives. And basically, I came to the conclusion that I had to do classes just on that alone, because there was so much trauma in people. And the art, the thing about art therapy is the ego can't protect itself against art. So no matter what that person writes or draws on a piece of paper, as an art therapist, I can read it like most people read a book. And it tells me exactly what questions to ask and where to go to uncover these traumas. But it just goes to show how deep this lack of creativity and fear of creativity has gotten into our society. And it goes hand in hand with all the various forms of programming that people are constantly exposed to from the educational system, which doesn't teach kids how to think, it teaches them what to think. And that's another reason I like Steiner schools and even some of the elements of Montessori, because they're more nurturing to the child's creative self-expression. And another thing that came up in me while I was listening to you share there is that one of the most common complaints I get when I'm working with patients with various health problems, and this comes up a lot, especially any kind of problem with the pelvic girdle, is that I hear complaints from both the men and the women that their sex life is terribly boring, and their partner doesn't want to do anything except the missionary position, and that they wish that they could have more play and sex. And I'm wondering, from your opinion as a woman, A, do you find that women get bored with sex because their male partners aren't creative? And B, do you find that women themselves are inhibited about using sex as a form of unbound play, creativity, and connection to self and partner?
Well, I think it's about communication, and I think it's about taking more responsibility for yourself instead of just saying, well, my partner doesn't want to do this, so I'm stuck here doing this, right? I've done a lot of also work around somatic sex in kind of exploring that for myself. And I've had a teacher who's taught me about these things. And it's really about discovering first what you like. So if you want to try some new things in the bedroom, then you try it on yourself first. You have a session with yourself and you start exploring that. And then you can teach your partner to do that with you. But if you can't expect your partner to know what you like unless you know what you like first.
But that's devil's play if you're a Christian or even potentially a Muslim or from the Jewish tradition. Any of the Abrahamic religions have all sorts of taboos around sex programmed in at a very early age, and we know the side effects of repressing that. The newspapers are full of stories of sexual abuse in churches, especially Catholic churches. So I agree with you, but as a guy who's suggested these very things to people, you wouldn't believe the kind of reactions that come out of people.
Yeah, I think some people maybe aren't ready for that, and they aren't ready to take responsibility for themselves yet. There can be a lot of things, as we know, around sex that people experience. There's a lot of triggers. There's a lot of trauma, especially if they've gone through, like you said, a religious system that has taught them that it's bad, and that's a problem within itself. Not really helping women know their own power with that, and that their body is just amazing, and it's such an amazing healer for both themselves and their partner. It's and yeah. There's just, I think if they're at that point, there's definitely some other work to be done, and so maybe some processing of trauma with that, or beliefs around why that is, because it's not really, it's something that we're taught for sure, right? That we're, because sex is a total natural thing. It's more natural than anything. So we
Yeah.
should have a good relationship with it. But I think
Yes.
that people sometimes, again, also like, what is your relationship with your body? How do you feel about that? And again, that always comes back to you. And you, if you can't touch your own body, if you can't have a session with yourself, a love session, then that's another thing to think about. Like, why?
Yeah, it's there's so many things I could say right now because of my experiences with all this as a therapist and as a human being, but um, we can save that for another interview. When we last met to prepare for this interview, you shared that worthiness is a core issue for many women. And it comes down to not feeling worthy enough, not being important enough to set time aside to be with oneself. And you shared that we women make ourselves small and then compensate by doing things for all sorts of other people. So from me as a male and a therapist, I'm very interested in your opinion as to what the source of this core challenge for women is.
Well, I think as we said earlier when we talked about sex, I think it's the same thing. It's what we've been taught, and uh, it depends on your upbringing, of course. And I think things are definitely changing for women, but I think that part of it is, I want to say that it has to do with abundance to some extent. That was what it was for me. I had a block around creating my own abundance as a woman and needing a man to do that for me, which was okay. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great to do that because, it was wonderful to have my husband provide me with abundance and finances during the time when I was pregnant and having a child where I couldn't work. So those are the things, like, that is a way that you can look at it as getting into the feminine by surrendering. That's very powerful, actually. And so you're surrendering to the masculine, who's going to create a container for you and keep you safe and secure. So that's a beautiful thing. And I love actually tapping into that myself, but I also love creating my own abundance. And so with that, I had to look at my own self-worth and see how much I valued myself, because I'm running a business and I have to be comfortable asking for enough money that I'm satisfied with, that it also compensates for the value that I see as, what the service I'm providing people and how much they value that by paying me. So, I think women haven't been working. They haven't been in the workforce as long as men have. It's not in our nature so much to really provide. And so hopefully that's going to come across well. But, I just think that, we're pretty new to this whole abundance thing and creating our own abundance through money, right? So with that goes self-worth. And so in our society, I think that money is very connected to worth in our society. And we connect, how much money we can make to how much we're worth, right? And how much we can contribute to society and those kind of things. But things like having children, it's not a paid position so much. And then so you don't feel like you're really contributing to society because you're not creating money, right? So, so going through all of that and realizing that it's really, creating money is a part of it, and that's a fun part of it. But really getting down to the meat of it is, how do you value yourself? How much value do you give yourself? How much do you feel like, how much do you feel like you're worth? Do you feel worth being around people that love you? Do you feel like you're worth setting boundaries around things like going to bed on time, like going to bed at a decent time, like before 10 p.m., right? Do you feel worth putting really good food in your body? Do you feel like you're worth it to slow down and to give yourself that playtime or that, downtime? Those are, and so if you're having trouble, it kind of is all related. So if you're having trouble doing those things for yourself, nurturing yourself, feeling taken care of, it all comes down to worth. And that all also stems from the relationship, of course, that we had with our parents, and how your mom loved you. So that's gonna also reflect, how your mom loved you is gonna reflect how much worth you feel in the world, how much you feel and can trust that you're going to be taken care of. And that is a lot related to self-worth.
Yes. Interestingly, you've mentioned abundance, but you've only really mentioned it in connection with financial abundance. What are other forms of abundance that you feel are important for a woman to create so that she has an enhanced sense of self and self-worth?
I definitely think connection is a huge one, and
Yeah.
community. And relationships and love. Those are all forms of abundance as well, and are very important to me personally. And I think if I just had the money without all of that, it would be a very shitty life.
Well, the old Beatles song, "Money won't buy you love."
That's true. Yeah, you have to, and so it can all work together. It's just that, and one's not, but I think that we have to learn the dance of all that, and where we are in our life, and how much, what kind of abundance we want to create for ourselves, kind of what's needing more support in that area, because you do want to be able to take care of yourself financially, because that's a security issue, right? But you also want to be able to feel like you belong and you're loved. So that's also equally important.
I think part of the challenge, though, that we all face, as you know, I teach I before we always, and I think most of us didn't learn to love ourselves as the basis of generating love so that we had authentic love to share with others, because our sense of how lovable we are is largely determined by the judgments of our parents, our school teachers, and our peers. So it seems to me that we've got this real challenge with loving ourselves, not only as women, but as human beings in general.
Absolutely. That's what I teach my clients. And that's a big part of the course that I just created called Build Your Food and Fitness Foundation. It's all about learning how to love yourself and how to nurture yourself and give yourself what you need to start bringing in those things that are really your foundation for health. And I just talked about this on my last episode on my podcast about how really to the degree that you can love yourself is the amount that you can give others love. Like, you can't give people more love than you can give yourself. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, it's just hard, like otherwise you're just a martyr, or you're extending yourself too much. You're depleting yourself. You can only give others as much as you can give yourself.
Yes. It's such a common theme when I'm doing therapy with people, particularly when I take them into shamanic healing ceremonies with plant medicines, that my soul gave me a chant to use, which I have them sing with me for quite some time to get harmonized before we do the medicine ceremony. And I end up singing it quite a lot in the ceremony when I see people struggling. And I will share the song with you because you might find it useful. And it's very simple. I am happy, I am healthy, I am whole. I take my love wherever I go. Because I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm whole. I take my love wherever I go. Oh yes, I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm whole. I take my love wherever I go. ...
I love that. That's beautiful.
And when people chant that for a half an hour or more, it starts to sink into their soul, and they realize that they can be happy, they can be healthy, and they can be whole, and they can take their love wherever they go. But we have to be brave enough to do that for ourselves. And until we learn to do that, paradoxically, we are trapped in the eternal child archetype, And it can make relationships very tricky because we're always dependent upon our partner or our spouse to make us happy.
Yeah, and that's a really hard place to be, and that codependency.
It is.
Yeah.
And, because I'm speaking about my approach to shamanic healing and my previous question about what are some of the forms of abundance other than financial, there's 5 key questions that I ask that I learned from studying shamanic traditions when I'm doing an assessment on somebody. And interestingly, if you listen to these questions, they all turn out to be questions of a unique type of abundance. Question number 1, when did you stop enjoying stories? When we enjoy stories, we really have a chance to get into the story. We become one with it. If you watch kids when they're watching movies, they actually start singing the songs and dancing the dances, and they get so immersed in it. It's for better or worse, they go into a trance state. But any of us, you watch people watching movies at a theater, they'll be crying and they'll be laughing and they'll be angry at the villain because they're truly getting the experience of the abundance of a story. And I think there's a lot of room for us to do story work. And I do a lot of work with my patients on writing their own myth or their own life story and then saying, okay, now let's realize it's only a story and we can edit the story. You can change your character. You can be as powerful or as sexy or as anything you want to be. And again, it's amazing how people have such a tremendously hard time editing that story and being creative enough to make their story interesting and exciting to them. And I say, just pretend that you're writing the story for your kids or your future kids, and it should be engaging for a kid that's 10 to 12 years of age. And it's tremendously hard for them to do that. But there is a story is a very powerful form of abundance. The next question is, when did you stop singing? And most people tell me, I don't even remember. Sometime when I was a child. But when I would sing, my mother would tell me I had a lousy voice, or my dad would tell me to shut up. So they've repressed their voice. But, I find singing is such a powerful healer. And it's not like you have to make up your own songs. You can drive down the road in your car singing to your favorite music or singing in the shower. One of the things I love is seeing parents take their kids or do karaoke with their kids because they really get into it. And
so much fun. I mean, it's just fun. Everything that you're saying it's just all fun. Like, when did we lose sight of fun, right?
Totally.
So
when did you stop? Yeah, when did you stop enjoying stories? When did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing?
Right, exactly. Wow,
I think dancing is probably more important for women than it is for men because it helps move Kundalini energy through their body and trapped emotions out of their body. And women are, in general, in my observation, more natural at just letting themselves go in dance. White guys have the common stigma of the white guy dancing. He, looks like a robot with a spasm in his ass and he can't move. But my experience of dancing with women throughout my life is they often inspire me, and they're very good at moving their energy. And the more they get out of their heads and just become one with the music, the more of a rhythmic abundance they create and a connection to their body. And I'm amazed. Sometimes I'll just ask clients of mine when I'm working with them, I'm going to put on some music. I just want to see you dance or dance with you. And a lot of them cannot dance. I've had tremendous numbers of males that are just locked up. They can't dance. They have that same sort of reaction as if I just asked them to do a piece of art. But I think that there's tremendous creativity and abundance for all of us, women and kids and men, in dance.
Yeah, I think it's a process for a lot of people. I remember being in that position, where I felt real uncomfortable doing things like that, and it wasn't until really midlife where I just started doing it. It just felt so good, and singing, like you said, storytelling, really getting into all of those things. Dancing I've been doing for a long time, but the thing about dancing is you can take a dance class. Like I've always been very formal with dancing, but to actually just free dance is a whole nother thing, right? So all you do is you just put some music on. You could do it like start by just dancing by yourself in your home. You don't have to do it in front of anybody, but just start doing that, it maybe just if people are uncomfortable doing that, like singing in front of other people or dancing in front of other people, then start just doing it on your own at home and see how that feels, Or,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes people just need these things in stages because we've put so much armor on as adults, to protect ourselves that, and Brene Brown talks about this. We aren't vulnerable anymore. We're not practicing vulnerability. And so that really weakens us in a lot of ways because we aren't moving our emotions through. We're suppressing a lot of things. We're not really bringing our true selves out into the world. We're suppressing it and pretending like, we're trying to act like what we think people want us to act like, but that's not really serving anybody. It's not in, I guess, really helping the world's creative expression, when people are doing that. So, start somewhere, I would say, with that. And you could also start creatively writing about your own story and maybe write a new story, like you said, you help your clients with. Write a story that is going to be with an outcome of how you would desire the outcome be,
Yeah. The other thing is for mothers, putting on some music that their kids like and just dancing with the kids. I think my experience of children is they're very uninhibited about dance. And
Yeah.
two things my little boy Mono loves to do. He loves to clean. We've found that if we just ask him to help us, like he'll help Penny out in the garden for hours at a time and just be the most amazing little guy. He just loves to help. So he loves to clean. He loves to hang out with the cleaning lady when she comes, and he'll polish his toys. He almost always wants to take a fire truck or a dump truck in the shower or the bathtub with him because he wants to clean it. But when he's cleaning the house and vacuuming, he loves to dance to the music. And so we all start dancing with him. And the next thing you know, we're all having a dancing cleaning party. And it's such a beautiful form of abundance in self-expression and freedom and letting go of attachment to judgment or outcome.
Absolutely. I love that. That's such a fun family activity. That sounds like a ton of fun for you guys. That's and that is the key, having fun together is just, especially as a family, is so important. And one thing you can do, just so you know, Paul, like when your kids become teenagers, you can dance in front of them and they'll be really embarrassed. That's a great way to embarrass them, is to dance in front of your kids when they become teenagers. And, my husband and I will dance, and because my son loves rap music, and when he puts it on, we'll dance and he gets totally embarrassed, but it's fun.
Well, I don't think my kids are going to be embarrassed to dance with dad. And by then, already so many kids are smoking pot these days. I would say, look, if you're already smoking pot, then smoke some pot and dance. At least the plant spirits will teach you how to live a little bit better. And so I'd rather have them smoking pot and dancing than getting put on attention deficit drugs and depression drugs and anxiety drugs. I mean, we have the highest rates of suicide amongst children of all ages that we've ever had in the history of humankind. So I say, if that's the issue, break out a little organic pot and everybody get over their inhibitions and become whole.
Yeah, well, what I meant by that was just that, I think teenagers don't ever want to see their parents being, sexual so much and dancing together like that.
Yeah.
It's just something that I was just joking around, but yeah.
No, it's cool. I mean, everything you're saying is true, but
it's really funny. Yeah, it's really funny.
I'm very confident that my kids won't have that problem because I'm not going to put them in a situation where mom and dad are unusual and we're all so natural with them. It's just like, it'll be like, a bunch of guys in a shower in the change room after a football game or something, just rocking out to their favorite music. And you'll know who Mana is because he'll be cleaning the locker room while he's dancing. But,
that's great that he loves to clean. That's a bonus.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. He's
so cute.
I don't know where he got it, but he just seems to dig it, And now our next question from the shaman is, when did you stop enjoying being alone with yourself? And I find that a huge percentage of people, patients, students, just have a really hard time being alone with yourself. And how can you really enjoy the abundance of the majesty, the mystery, and the beauty of who you are unless you spend time with yourself? And if you don't have that abundance, you're already in deep shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have plenty of things to distract ourselves now, right? So we don't ever have to really be alone, which is kind of unfortunate. But if you could start definitely practicing that and feel what it feels like to be alone, if you have anxiety around that, then what's that about?
Well, one of the paradoxes that I see as a guy who's spent a lifetime studying spirituality, mysticism, religion, is that one of the kind of what's the right word for it? One of the paradoxes of human beings today, with all the social, cultural, and religious programming, is they keep looking for God outside of themselves, as though God is an object or an old man in the sky or something that they can encapsulate in a sense. But the reality of it is, the journey to find God outside of yourself is a very long one. I mean, if you died right now, 100 years from now, you're moving at the speed of light. Your soul would still be in the Milky Way galaxy, and you got about 100 billion galaxies to go. But you can find the majesty of that mystery right inside your own heart and your own body. And I think if people enjoyed or took time to truly enjoy being with themselves and explore their inner worlds through meditation, active imagination, even contemplative prayer, or just listening to the sounds of nature, going for nature walks by themselves. There's a many ways to do it, but it would bring, I know I have to have that. I have a strong link to the hermit archetype. And if I don't have that time with myself, I feel like I'm dying when I work with other people and do things for other people. So I learned as a therapist that and I went through a midlife crisis because I didn't have time enough to be with myself. And I felt like I was just bleeding myself into everybody's problems and solving this problem and this gut and this back and this neck and this broken relationship and that broken business. And I got to the point where I was just so desperate to be alone. I didn't even care if my business lit on fire and burned, as long as I was actually going to join a Zen monastery just to go be with people that like to be alone. But,
right. Yeah, no, I'm very much the same way. I have to carve out time every day for just to be by myself so I can recharge. I think it's very important. Either, one of my favorites is getting out in nature. I do a lot of hiking, and I like that, just being quiet, not having a phone, other than to take pictures with, but just, not really even having a signal or anything, and just walk. And, things come up. I'm able to really process a lot that has been happening throughout the day or the week for myself when I have that time. But otherwise, I wouldn't be able to process a whole bunch, and it would just kind of get stuck. I kind of feel like if I didn't have that time for myself.
Well, you can never learn to hear the voice of your own soul unless you turn your ears around 180 degrees and bring your consciousness to the voices within. And most of us in the world today have so many complexes, as Jung would define them, as subpersonalities that we've created due to fragmentation through pain and trauma, that until we start really listening to those voices, we often don't know who it is that's reaching for the food when they're not hungry, or reaching for the drugs when they're not in pain, or acting out in ways that are damaging in relationship to self and others. and then wondering, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I do that again when I'm watching and I know that I don't need to do that? And if we don't spend time alone with our ears turned inward, we really never get to know what parts of ourself are happy, what parts of ourself are broken. And we don't have the time to go in and be our own parent and our own therapist, which is really just seeing that inside of us, there's a lot of broken kids that all need the same nurture that we did as kids. But if we keep waiting for somebody else to do it for us, well, then we end up in a doctor's office and it comes in a pill bottle, not in the form of genuine connection. And nobody else can give us that kind of love. We have to give it ourselves. And that is a form of abundance that can't be bought at any price.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's probably the most important of all the abundances, like it's just love for self. It just doesn't, there's not much you can do if you don't have that, if you don't, and being able to reflect and having some quiet time for yourself, actually being able to slow down is just crucial.
And the final question of the key questions that a shaman asks is, when did you stop enjoying and having a sense of awe for the magic and the mystery of life? And how do we do that if we don't have time to be with life, to be with ourselves, to sing, to dance, to enjoy stories? If we don't do that, then where is the magic and the mystery of life? It just becomes, did I get promoted? Am I beautiful enough when I look in the mirror? Do I have the right car to be cool? Do I have the most updated iPhone? Do I have the in vogue shoes? Do I have my Michael Air Jordans? So we end up really identifying ourselves, and our sense of abundance becomes 100% externalized into objects and into the objective. But none of those things give any value or connection to the subjective, which is what's witnessing it all to begin with, but externalizing that sense of connection to some object, which limits oneself to the ends of that object, the front bumper to the back bumper of my car. So someone's car gets a ding in it and they go into a crisis,
Yeah.
And
that's a huge problem. And it loops back to what we started out. It loops back to what we started talking about, which was, the external validation in what most kids experience when they're athletes. You have to learn you have to learn who you are. And that's, otherwise you're going to constantly be going through life trying to get validation from others, and many people will influence you. And I think that's a big problem with what's going on right now, especially with all the pharmaceuticals right now, and a lot of the vaccine issue, and all these things, and and the abortion stuff. Like, so many things are coming up right now, and so many people feel like they have the right to tell people how to live their life when they don't even really know. They've probably not gotten clear on how they want to live their life or about themselves first, So we got to get clear about ourselves before we can start really serving other people. We have to start there.
Yeah. Until you do, you don't know whose ideas you're just being a music box for. You're like a jukebox in a disc in a bar. Someone throws a quarter and off you go, singing some song that ultimately turns out to be something that is potentially not only making you sick, but making your family sick.
Yeah, there's no way to know where influencers are coming from if you don't know yourself first. So, you could be, you could still be living out your parents' values for all you know. You don't really know, until you start investigating that and really looking into it.
Well, yes, I think I might have quoted this earlier, but, Jung made it very clear that the task of all children is the unfinished lives of their parents.
Yeah.
Well, Alison, I'm totally enjoying our conversation. Thank you for sharing your love and your wisdom as a woman, as a mother, as a therapist. Now I'd like to dive into an area that is something I think is really, really on the rise in many ways due to a breakdown in our social, religious, cultural programming. And, many people get married with the till death do you part concept and believe they'll burn in hell if they don't stick it out. But as we discussed earlier, the average marriage today only lasts 2.5 years, and research shows the average person gets married 3 times in their lifetime. So that's a lot of sinning going on. And there's the statistics all the way back to the Kinsey report, and even more modern statistics show that even in so-called monogamous relationships, there's a tremendous amount of behind the door cheating going on, which leads to more guilt, shame, and pain and health problems. So you had previously shared with me that you've been with your husband since you were 24 and he 25, and have started exploring multiple partners, and that he had fallen in love with another woman around 2011, which created a lot of separation in the relationship. And so, since that process has began with you, just curious, where are you at inside yourself? How do you feel the incidence of this is in women that you work with? Do you feel that there's women that are maybe exploring these multiple partner relationships in secret, going against their marriage vows, that's leading to stress? Do you find that this is related to some of their physical, mental, emotional challenges? And where are you at in your own process, and what are some of the realizations that you've come to about this issue?
Well, yeah, that's a big question, and maybe I should start with kind of how I got into all of this with my husband. First of all, we've been together. We were together in college, so we've been married since I was 24, but we've been together actually since I was 21. So we've been married for almost 22 years now, and when you grow up with somebody, when you really are a kid, when you meet and you grow throughout the years with someone, you start to wonder at some point, are we together because we want to be together? Or are we together just because it's convenient and we kind of have been together for so long? We're not really sure. And the other component to that is you realize that, well, who am I apart from this person? We've meshed so much as we, throughout the years, we've gotten so intertwined with our relationship that we've lost sight of who we are as individuals and and what our values are as individuals. So that's where I was, and it was quite a mess. When now, give you my husband, he is a wonderful man. I love him so much. And he came to me before anything happened. It was more of an emotional connection. He and this other woman had become really good close friends very quickly, and it kind of hit him pretty unexpectedly too. He had never experienced this before. He wasn't expecting to experience this, but all of a sudden he had these really strong feelings for this other woman. He felt like there was infatuation for sure, and love, I think too, And so it was a very confusing time. He came to me with this and explained to me, as hard as it was to do that, he explained to me what was going on. And he said, I just want to be honest with you before anything was to happen. Like, this is what's going on. I don't know what to do. And to hear something like that, to hear your husband say, like, I don't know what to do, because he'd always been the person that knew what to do. It was like, again, the floor, I felt like, had just been taken out from under me. And I was in total shock, And for me, I'm kind of an all or nothing person, or I used to be more of that, I guess. So I was like, you're either with me or you're not with me, like. And so I kind of was. My first response was just, I need to get out of this situation. I need to leave. Like, that's, that was what I would always do, is just run, And so I couldn't really do that, and there was really nowhere for me to go, and I kind of had to stay in the situation. So we we went through so many things emotionally, went through so many emotional roller coasters. And I said to him, like, can you just cut it off with her and not see her? They couldn't stop. They couldn't like not see each other. They tried and they couldn't. So, and then nothing sexual ever happened, but they just had this intense like connection. And it was really hard because I felt like what I had always known about relationships was that you're with someone forever. If you're married, you're with that person, and there's nothing. I'd never had any role models that taught me any different. I didn't have anybody in my life that had any kind of an open relationship or anything that would show me that there's any other options out there, other than you, Paul, actually, because that was when I knew you too. But, and so I was it was a hard time, and a big part of me died that day. I was just, it was a kind of like the dark night of the soul kind of time. And so I went through that, and so did he. And we got through it. And so we ended up moving to Portland. And we thought, okay, well, this isn't going to happen again. This is fine. We went through this, and we decided we really wanted to be together after all of this. And so we're gonna stay together. We're gonna make this work. And so we moved to Portland and thought, hey, yeah, everything's gonna be fine. It's a new start. We're gonna keep moving on here. And he ends up meeting another woman that he really is attracted to and wants to have a relationship with. And I'm painting a picture of him. Some people listening might think he's, a terrible person because of that. But you got to remember the situation was this. I see this as like a growth opportunity for me, and I think the universe was telling me, no, you have to do this. You have to go through this. So, I was like, screw this, I'm going to move out. I'm going to move into an Airbnb. I'm not going to deal with this again. This is too much stress. I ended up getting shingles, and it was such a stressful time. And I went through a lot of emotional turmoil. And he didn't, of course, want to hurt me either. And so he just, he felt horrible. We both felt horrible. It was a horrible experience. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have any kind of roadmap to know how to navigate this. What do you do when you have feelings for another person, but you want to stay with the partner that you're with, Because that was the conundrum. It was like, it would have been easy if we just decided, hey, we just don't want to see each other again. You go do you, I'll go do me. But that's not what happened. We had a strong connection. We still wanted to be together. And so how are we going to make that work? And I was like, well, I kind of just like a monogamous relationship, but it sounds like he really wants a polyamorous relationship. So what do we do? And so it occurred to me that, after much, I had gone and done some work emotionally, some emotional coaching work, and really gotten deep down into some things. And then we went to a polyamorous coach, and she coached us through some stuff. And that was really great. We learned so much from that. And it really just taught us that we needed to learn how to communicate better with each other. And that really needed to be sound, especially if we're going to dive into this, because I decided at some point, I was like, well, I just surrendered to the possibility that maybe this is something that I would like to, dive into. Maybe this is something I want, And I said, well, that could be exciting. And I imagined all the possibilities that could be if I dove into this. What could happen? What could I learn about myself? And so Liam ran across this book. Actually, even before we went to the polyamorous coach, Liam ran across this book called, it was the, oh God, my mind just went blank.
Sex at Dawn?
Yes, thank you. Chris Ryan's book, who was a friend of ours, his book, Sex at Dawn. And this is before we met Chris, but Liam read his book, and then, he was like, look, hey, read this book. This is really interesting. This talks a lot about like kind of, what we're going through in the situation and why we would feel the way we do and those kinds of things. And so I read it and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And, let's look at this a little more deeply. And so Of course, now we realize we're in Portland, which is like the polyamorous capital of the world, of course.
I was
And
going
I
to
don't know
say
if people know that or not, but
you moved to Portland to
I
get
know
away from that.
we didn't really know until we moved here. And so
That's God's
um,
sense of humor.
it is, right? Exactly. So apparently it's a very normal thing here, if no one knows that. But uh, so we eventually became friends with Chris. He moved to Portland for a short time. And we became friends with him. And just actually by meeting him and talking to him and meeting people, friends of his, and talking to people who it was really kind of a normal occurrence and people were doing it. And I was like, this is interesting. Just learning about it from other people's perspectives and knowing that it's actually not it's a normal thing for a lot of people, and a lot of people actually want to do it. You know what I mean? And I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
wow, that's really interesting. And so, but I never, the thing that I didn't really get was very successful relationships that were polyamorous. And I wasn't seeing a lot of those. And so that was part of it, was like, okay, well then how are we going to do this successfully? And I realized that it really, there's no book for it. There's no rules on how to go polyamorous. It's just you kind of have to make your own rules up based on, your communication between your partner. So being brutally honest, being really, really honest, which means you have to know yourself a lot to be honest with another person, whether something's triggering you or if something really is not okay. You have to speak up. You can't just say, "Oh, well, this is really good for my partner, so I should just let it go and let it slide." But if it bothers you, you shouldn't do that. So I was seeing a lot of people that were in denial in these relationships and just kind of letting things slide. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person that just is the person that's alone at home alone, that's and their partner's off, doing things or whatever. And so it was a lot, and we're still kind of not, fully there. This has been many, many years, and we're still playing around with it. It's not like we've jumped into the polyamorous pool or anything. We're really just still playing around with imagining and ideas around it. And Liam has a girlfriend, a friend that's in Canada, and that's really great because she's in another country. So, and then I've played around with some dating as well, and just simply because I'm curious about what I'd be like with another man, because part of my journey is that I've always wondered, when you're with somebody for so long, you kind of know who you are with them. You're a certain person with them in some respects, and there's some comfort within that too. But I think you really learn about yourself, and even if it's not an intimate relationship, you still learn about yourself when you're building new relationships with people, especially in the beginning. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of like getting to know each other. There's a lot of excitement within that, and I started discovering that I started acting differently, like I needed to perform or I needed to impress around guys that I wasn't, besides my husband. And I was like, what is that all about? Like, why do I feel like I have to put on this like image and I can't just be myself in front of somebody, that I'm getting to know for the first time. And so that was so like things like that, little lessons like that are things that I've learned that have really helped me learn more about myself and how I could grow as a person to expand my capabilities. And that can actually spill out into so many more things. But our journey was to explore that somewhat. And it took us to where we are now, which we wanted to get divorced a couple of times for sure. We were very much close to it. But we did we did a lot of emotional work together, and we found that we really wanted to be together, which is really actually pretty special. I don't know that many people discover that about each other. I think it's a huge deal to discover that you actually want to be together and you don't really need each other. Like I don't like need him. I could totally be okay on my own, but like I want to be with him, there's a difference. So, he makes me laugh. We have fun together. He really brightens my life, and that's why I like being with my partner. But we have this thing that we want to kind of explore too, which is to explore ourselves around other people. And I don't know yet where that's going to take us. And from this point on, like I'm going to, I don't think you're not going to get triggered. I don't think you're not going to get jealous. I don't think that necessarily goes away with time or experience. I think you have to use those triggers and that jealousy to communicate with your partner, to learn and grow and discover what's within you that needs some attention. And so I think those are the types of growth opportunities. Also, with that, you get to also exercise your boundaries. I mean, how many times are we really doing that in life? Like how many times is it crucial that we exercise our boundaries that way? So literally, if you aren't liking something that your partner's doing, you have to be truthful, and that's a great way to learn how to set those boundaries. So so it's still a work in progress. It's still something we're learning about. But really being around Chris and that during that time, that was pretty healing for me, just because I wasn't, when we lived in Atlanta, there wasn't a bunch of people that were really living that life. And I just kind of felt like I was alone in that whole journey, and I couldn't tell anybody or talk to anybody about it. And it was really, really hard, but and nobody knows really what to do in that situation, to be honest with you. So, except for people who have been through it themselves.
Yes. Well, you can rest assured in every city in the world, there's plenty of people that are going through that experience, but they're keeping it as secret as possible. And at that point, it's called cheating on your spouse or your partner.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And that's really hurtful. And that's one thing we didn't want to do. And I think it's a total natural thing to be attracted to other people. That's the other thing we realize. It's not like you're a bad person if you're attracted to someone else. It's totally normal.
It's totally normal. In fact, if you weren't, you'd probably have a deeper problem.
Yeah, right.
I did a very comprehensive exploration of multiple partner relationships with Aubrey Marcus and Kyle Kingsbury. And I've got so many podcasts on deck. I'm probably about 12 or so podcasts ahead of schedule, but that podcast will probably come out before this one goes live. But for anyone listening that hasn't listened to my podcast on multiple partner relationships with Aubrey Marcus and Kyle Kingsbury, it's a very deep exploration, and I get deep into the depth psychology of it all. But there's a few things that I wrote notes on while you were talking, because I didn't want to interrupt you. One is, are you familiar with what an anima or an animus projection is?
No, actually.
Well, in Jungian psychology, the anima is the feminine element that is subjective, that every male has. So because God is whole, or because nature is whole, if you want to use a different language, if a woman has a feminine body, then her inner nature has to be masculine to counterbalance it. So a man's soul nature is that of a woman. In Jungian psychology, that's the animus. And a woman's soul nature is masculine. And it carries the counterbalancing qualities that are the classic qualities of woman, such as a nurturer, holding the family together, being receptive, etc. So her animus has the qualities that are masculine: kicking the kids out of the house, discernment, logic, rationality, getting to the bottom line. And so if a woman does not engage her animus, then she becomes a pushover. She becomes somebody else's doormat. She becomes controlled by men and loses her life and ends up like a lot of women with heart disease that die of loving everybody else at the expense of themselves because they don't listen to their inner voice that says, you need time for yourself. You need to take care of yourself. You need to learn to say no when it's time to say no instead of just giving in. You need to tell your kids to clean their own bedroom instead of breaking your back because they're 13 years old and they're still not picking up after themselves. So that inner voice that a woman inherently has that carries those male qualities is her animus.
Okay.
A man has the same qualities. So when a man's about to spank a kid for being mischievous, devious, or getting in trouble, the woman in him says, do you really want to do that? Maybe they need a hug, ... And to the degree we don't listen to our soul nature, then we stay polarized in ways that actually lead to too much turmoil and problems within ourselves and in our relationships. And that often leads to health problems, diseases, and the need for doctors. But really, those doctors should be depth psychologists in this point. But why I'm bringing this up for you is because Jung showed very clearly, and I see it every day in therapy and have studied it myself extensively, that we project our soul nature out onto others. And in a man, his animus, the nature of his animus is basically most informed and influenced by his mother archetype, because each man's first experience of a woman is his mother. So the qualities of his mother that he is most attracted to, for example, the first pair of boobs any man gets his hands on is his mother's boobs. So to the degree that he was nurtured by those boobs, he has an imprint in his mind of what those boobs looked like, felt like, taste like, and how they nurtured him. And so, for example, if a man's mother had nice full boobs, he's likely to be attracted to women with nice full breasts without realizing that he's projecting his mother anima onto, or his mother archetype onto women. What you're describing in your husband, which is completely natural, is that whenever he comes in contact with a woman who has characteristics that remind the little boy in him of his mother, he will fall in love with her, just like the little boy is in love with his mother. But he will actually think he's in love with this adult woman and not realize he's got an anima projection, which is a projection of the mother. And the woman does exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that is what I found out as well. Yeah, through that process, that is what happened, and what continues to happen, I think. But yeah,
it always happens.
It's interesting, right? Yeah.
Well, it's basically, it's got a very deep spiritual reason. You see, remember Jung said the task of all children is the unfinished business of their parents. How can you work through the unfinished business of your parents unless you attract one of them into your life? So we attract. I'm sure if you and your husband were in therapy with me, I would very, very, very easily identify where he's living out the unfinished business of his parents and you yours, and how you two carry exactly the seeds and the triggers that each of you needed to activate the unfinished business in each other to work through it and grow through it. And if we didn't have that built into us, evolution would cease. We'd all just be photocopies of our parents and nothing would change.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I think that is a huge reason on why we stayed together. I felt this huge, I just felt, well, not huge, but strong pull to see where this takes us, you know? Initially, like I said, I wanted to run, and then I realized when I kind of settled down, I realized, hey, this is something I have to do. So I think it was hard for me at first because what was bugging me in the beginning was the judgment I would get from other people. So I kept it secretive and didn't really want to tell, of course, family and stuff like that. So it was hard until I met the group in Portland, and then it was much easier to talk about. But I think that's a big deal too, that we don't think about. There's there's a judgment around that, like you don't want to be the woman who gets taken advantage of, or you don't want people to see you that way. Like, oh, she's getting taken advantage of. Her husband is doing what he wants to do and she's just letting it happen. Well, of course that's not the case. And those are the things that I was worried about. And finally I was just like, well, let me just figure out what I want to do.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's right back to the shaman saying you need to spend time with yourself to know who you are, or your sense of self is only based on what other people say about you or what their judgments are. And this goes right back to Christian puritanical programming and fitting into the group and not upsetting God and making sure you look just right and you don't disgrace the family, and anything that doesn't fit the values of the church has to be kept secret. And the list is very, very long. But there's something deeper rising up in here. You talked about, your reaction to him being with another woman, how you wanted it all or nothing, or you're going to get out of Dodge. And that's a very, very common reaction from both sides, male or female, depending on who's the one that's having the announcement. I think I might be in love with somebody else, or I'm attracted to someone else. But one of the things that people still haven't figured out in general is that the reason there's such slow spiritual growth amongst human beings is that by definition, spirituality is connecting to a greater and greater whole. And the greater the whole you connect yourself to, the more you realize that you're not in control of most things in your life. But the ego's illusion is that it is in control. The woman's ego illusion is that she has some level of control over her husband and he won't have sex with anybody else or fall in love with anybody else. And a man often has the same control drama going. But in reality, the ego is creating an illusion. I'll just ask you a simple question. Of all the things that your ego thought it was in control of, now that you look back on your life, how often was it really in control?
It was. I mean, I realized at that moment that was a turning point for me, actually, when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to control him. And the more I tried to control the whole thing, the less control I had. Like literally, it would go. It would not go how I wanted it to go at all. So I had to really, like I said, I had to surrender. I really had to surrender, and I think that's one of the first times I had to do that in my life. And let go of that control. And that is part of what I've learned about tapping into my feminine, is being able to do that, and not it being a weak thing, so much as it's just a letting go, and then let's see where that mystery takes us. Like, we don't know, it's pretty unknown right now, but let's see where this takes us. It could be fun. It could be exciting. It could actually end very badly. I don't know, let's just take this ride. And it's not like we're being irresponsible about it, but I just think that sometimes there's things in life. I mean, a lot of times, actually, there are more times than we want to realize, there's things in life that are very unknown, and we can't control everything.
Well, I'm going to share some things with you. One, you just used a very magical word that's inherently a pivotal word in spiritual development, and that is surrender. We are actually not practicing true religion or spirituality until we learned to surrender. And we also need to learn to sacrifice. And sometimes it takes a much bigger heart and a much bigger soul and a much bigger capacity to love, to surrender to and to sacrifice to the needs of somebody that you love, if they're genuine and they're not based in trickery or malice. He came forward to you and shared with you, which is a very, very rare thing for most people to do. So he already demonstrated a tremendous level of commitment to you to be vulnerable and to share that with you before his sex organs took over. So, the spirituality is, by definition, that which dissolves the ego. So people resist anything that threatens their sense of control or the ability to have what their ego thinks they want. But to the degree that the ego keeps getting what it thinks it wants, it doesn't get challenged to grow itself. So again, evolution ceases. So all religious systems at their core, all spiritual development systems, was what religions really are intended to be before they became corporatized, are systems of learning how to let love be your anchor and trust God in the universe, that things are unfolding the way they're intended to do due to the perfection behind that which creates the universe itself. So if our idea of God is something that is inherently that which can be controlled, then we have no God whatsoever. We are in love with an idea, which is the practice of idolatry, which is unfortunate because the Christian religion killed countless pagans and others for practicing idolatry. But if you study what idolatry is, the Christian religion is smack dab caught right in it full force. And so we see this sort of worshiping an idea that gives us a false sense that God's giving us what we want so that we can have what we want when we want it. And if we don't get it, then we're pissed off at God, which is really to be stuck again in the child archetype. But surrender is also truly feminine. And most men have a tremendous problem with surrender because we're trained right from the very beginning to be tough guys. Don't let anyone push you around. Always win. If someone punches you, punch them back. So, all you got to do is look at Donald Trump and you'll see he's as far from the concept of the feminine principle as a man can possibly get. And it's very damaging to our culture. It's dangerous to the entire planet. Another thing that I meditate on and teach my patients and clients and students is that true love cannot be lost. It can only be transformed. So whenever you're feeling this sense of insecurity or fear, if you truly have love in a relationship, that love is unshakable. It may manifest itself in different ways, just like the earth manifests itself in different ways as an expression of its love in spring and summer and fall and winter. Nobody walks around in the middle of winter in a field of snow upset because there's no oranges on the trees, because that manifestation of love has transformed itself into something that's essential for the earth's own capacity to nurture itself, which is winter. So part of us growing up and having deeper relationships than we begin with childlike expectations and projections upon each other of my rescuer who's going to make my life perfect and always going to be there for me and ... is this actual growth into the depth of our spiritual unfolding and into allowing love to transform from puppy love to romantic love to mature love. And you're smack dab in the middle of experiencing mature love, which comes with facing adult realities and facing the difference between false religion and false spirituality and that which challenges the ego to surrender to something greater, a greater, more all-encompassing love, which, as you said, requires a lot of honest communication, or the ego starts projecting its own judgments, biases, and fears and believing them as though they're facts. And that leads to people killing their partners. Any detective will tell you whenever a spouse dies, the first person they investigate is the other spouse.
Right. Yeah. That does happen. I watch Forensic Files sometimes and I see
there you go. Yeah. Make sure you leave the scene clean.
Yeah.
Which means you can't drop any DNA. So that's tricky.
Right. Most of the time, the husbands end up killing the wives, unfortunately, on that show. I stopped watching that because it's just so dark. But I liked watching it because of it just was a fun puzzle to put together. But it's interesting.
Yeah,
science behind it.
We all love looking at ourselves. And that's what all these shows are. They're all just looking at the parts of ourselves that it's easier to watch on television than look inside of ourselves and see. And that's part of the immaturity of our culture that's trapped in this childhood dogmatic religious idea. This is exactly why Osho said Abrahamic religions are religions for children and Eastern religions are religions for adults, because there's no daddy in the sky to rescue you or punish you or tell you what to do. You have to develop your own relationship with God, and you have to take responsibility for your own choices. And there is no paying for penance to get into heaven to compensate for your misgivings. You have to work through it and work out your own karma. And that is truly what a religion for adults is. That is Buddhism. That is Taoism. That is Hinduism. There's many, much more adult religions than the ones we're caught in. That doesn't mean there's not adult components of, or that Christianity, Islam, or Judaism can't be very adult. But to find the adults in those religions, you have to study the mystics. You've got to study Saint Hildegard. You've got to who was considered to be the first women's liber in the world. You've got to study Saint Bernard. You've got to study Meister Eckhart and people like that. And you find that these were not only very, very deep, trailblazing people, but they often said the things they said at risk of having themselves killed by the church. And many of them did die for sharing the truth. In fact, if you study Saint Hildegard, I think it would be great for any woman wanting to really see how powerful a woman can be. All the way back in the 11th century, she was trailblazing, and she was like the Joan of Arc of mysticism, and an absolute unbelievable, powerful woman, amazing artist, music composer, wrote scriptures. She had one of the most evolved healing approaches to diet. I've got 2 of her books on diet that are mind-blowing that she wrote in the 1100s. She even shows how to use meat for healing, different approach. I mean, mind-blowing. I mean, if you go on Amazon and search Saint Hildegard, you'll find at least 2 or 3 great documentaries on her life. And she is a great example of really an adult approach to Christianity. And then you got Father Thomas Keating, who was amazing, who did a lot of work with Ken Wilber before he died, and you can find his stuff. So there is amazing teachers in Islam. You've got Rumi, who was just way out there. It's amazing they didn't torture him to death. And I mean, Rumi's teachings are so absolutely mature, and it's the connection to and the depth of and the understanding of God, they just blow the typical Western religions so far out of the water. It's like, what happened over here? Well, it's called corporate religion. It's called using religion to brainwash people to make money off them. And it's not a surprise that the Vatican is considered to be the richest corporation in the world, and it doesn't take but about a few hours of study to figure out exactly how that has been done. And this goes right back to these issues of multiple partner relationships and many, many other things, because we are not given the tools to really explore what unconditional love really is. We don't realize that unconditional love is absolutely volatile. It's explosive. It makes universes. It makes stars. It does not have fear of doing anything. It is doing everything you see for better or worse, because God has no fear of knowing what God really is, and God cannot know until God explores the light and the dark with equal intensity, equal honesty, and that is as deep as love gets. So one of the things that you triggered me to share is that, I've noticed that women often seem to be a little bit kind of uneducated as to the nature of how a man's mind works. And men are wired by nature to spread their seed. The concept of monogamy does not live in the second chakra of a man. And evolution wouldn't happen if men didn't have the urge to spread their seed. And Sex at Dawn gives a very good expose of the tribal approach to sexuality. And you can study Voices of the First Day by Robert Lawler. He gives a mind-blowing expose of how the Aboriginals teach sex to their children, how they practice it, how most Aboriginal women, young men are not allowed to get married in an Aboriginal tribe until usually about 37 to 40 years of age. And from the time they reach puberty, they're encouraged to have sex with all the married women. And each of the married women's job is to teach that man how to pleasure a woman. And only when the women of a tribe deem him an effective man to be married to do they give him approval to get married.
Wow.
Yes, our cultural approach to sex is as childish as our approach to religion, politics, money, nature, science, dot, dot, dot. And I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just being honest. I spent my life researching this. And as you know very well, Allison, I've spent 35 years working with very messed up people trying to get to the core of what's really driving it. And these are the very issues at the core of tremendous amounts of problems. And a lot of it boils down to this concept of the ego trying to control the outcome. But if you try to control the outcome with the ego, you're trying to use yesterday's ideas to control what's happening in the present. And yesterday is gone. And today is a new opportunity to learn, to live, to love, and grow. And I had to work through these things in my first marriage. And I talk about that in my podcast with Aubrey Marcus and Kyle Kingsbury. And we get very, very deep into it, much deeper than I have time to get in with you. But my point is, women don't realize that oftentimes they get married to a man and they think, I got him now. So within a year, they stop being the pretty girl that they used to be. They gain a lot of weight quite often. And they don't have that excitement about him anymore, that mystique. But a man is wired for change. He's wired for novelty. He's wired for different color eyes, different color hair, different body attraction. And one of the things that I've shared with many women that have come to me with relationship problems behind their irritable bowel syndromes or their digestive syndromes or their menstrual cycle problems or their back pain or their neck pain or their breast cancer, as I ask them, when's the last time you actually went out, got your hair cut, changed your hair color, got your nails done, changed your makeup style? And most of them say, oh, I haven't done that in years. I don't even remember when. That just means your husband is flat out bored to death, and the spirit of him can't help but look for somewhere to metaphorically plant his seed. And many women have told me how amazing it has been for them when they go out. And I tell women, most of you girls love to buy some clothes. Anyhow, go out and buy some new nightwear, some negligees, some sexy nighties. Change the color of your hair. Change enough that when he comes home, he goes, wow, honey, what happened? And his sexual juices begin to flow, and it can just reignite a relationship. And it's up to the women to decide what they need to see in the men. The most common thing I hear from women is that their husbands are boring in bed. Well, then teach them what turns you on. And if we just connected with each other, understood each other better, and gave each other the gift of loving each other enough to give that, there would be far less cheating in marriages, and there would be far less need for anima and animus projections to try to give ourselves this momentary experience of being alive. Because when we have an anima or animus projection, and we have this sort of kind of teenage puppy love experience like you've just described with your husband, it lets us feel alive again. But we go home and it's like Groundhog Day, same smells, same macaroni and cheese, same TV show, same sound of the vacuum, same ... Well, we all get bored, and the soul of us says, this isn't what you came to this planet to do. You came here to enjoy stories. You came here to sing. You came here to dance. You came here to spend time with yourself, to learn who you really are, and get a relationship with your soul so you can be guided, not from your ego, which is made of everybody else's ideas, not your own. If we don't spend time with ourselves, then we are trapped in our ego, which is an illusory construct of other people's ideas. And I'll ask you a question. I ask people to prove this. Allison, if I could plug your head into a quantum supercomputer and download every idea that you have in your head that you think is your own, how many of those ideas, if I track them, would actually be of your own novel making versus ideas you'd picked up from reading books, talking to people, hanging out with teachers, watching television, listening to podcasts, ...
That's a great question. I would say not many, probably.
For most people with honest analysis, say it probably wouldn't be more than 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
And I say you're right. And that's what your ego is. Your ego is about 98% mom's ideas, dad's ideas, school teachers' ideas, church's ideas, government's ideas, society's ideas, coaches' ideas, teams' ideas, television ideas, but almost none of it is who we really are. And we find ourselves in a marriage crisis, and we actually think that what we want is what we want without realizing all we're doing is acting out artificial intelligence that's been planted into our head, and we still don't even know who we are or what we want, and we're damn afraid to go out there and figure it out. When the knock on the door of a husband or a wife having a desire to have an affair is usually Great Spirit tickling you in just the right spot to get you to wake up and say, get to know yourself on your own time, by your own values, but be honest about it, or you're just playing a very dangerous game of bullshitting yourself, and this relationship will fall apart, and your next relationship will fall apart, and you will go through this until you're dead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's, if you think about it like this too, it doesn't have to be another human being. It can be interest in something else too that takes the interest away from the partner in the relationship. It could be a hobby, it could be a job.
Absolutely.
So I think that we have to remember, and like you mentioning people keeping up with themselves and letting themselves go when they're in a comfortable relationship. I think there's some beauty to comfort and security for sure. But at the same time, you need to be a little uncomfortable sometimes and realize that nothing is set in stone, that nothing's forever. It's not your promise to no one, as John McMullen says. So I would say that with that, you got to fall in love with yourself. You have to bring the interest back to you. And I think what makes actually Liam, and it would be the same for him, us more attracted to each other is when we are able to creatively express and be ourselves. And that's so hot. That's so beautiful to see in someone else, I mean, of course, when you're doing that, then you're excited about living. You're excited about your life. You want to look good for your partner. Naturally, you want to look good for yourself. So that all should come pretty naturally when you're being yourself.
Yes, and when you look at how many people in marriages have gotten to the point where they can't even see their own genitals anymore, I'd say it's safe to say they've let themselves go.
Yeah, and that guys do that too, plenty.
Oh, man. I'm by no means polarized in my observations.
Yeah, but I think you got to do it for you though, and then, if you can find, I guess if you get motivation from doing it for other people, but I think it's got to be, at this point in my life anyway, I just want to feel good in my body. I want to feel good. I want to feel light. I want to feel sexy. I want to feel healthy. I want to feel like I have energy. Like that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what keeps me moving every day. That's why I eat really healthy food. That's why I get to bed before 10. That's why,
When you open the door to loving yourself and caring for yourself as loving for yourself, it's the same door that love from someone else walks through, isn't it?
Yes.
And until that door is open, then no matter how hard someone tries to please you as a lover, as a partner, as a spouse, all they can do is give you boxes of chocolates or a new pair of shoes. And it's just an empty form of love. It's really it's really an expression of consumerism.
Yeah, it's just when you say something like that person isn't doing it right, or they're doing it wrong or whatever, they're not meeting my needs. Well, that's because you're not meeting your needs.
Exactly.
So that's something to pay attention to.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, just from my own experience, it seems to me from my experience having two wives that most women actually need another wife more than they need another man. The work of raising a child and running a family, and the cost of living a decent lifestyle and being able to afford organic food and a vacation and having enough money to have decent insurance for whatever you need to protect your home, your car, your health, whatever. I mean, it's expensive to live a life that allows you some comfort and some freedom. And it seems to me that most women would have far better likelihood of really feeling alive and supported if they had another woman in the house, whether there was sex involved or not. I mean, I know when Penny and I first got together, Penny and I have just had our 22nd anniversary, March the 29th. So we've been together pretty much the same time you guys have been together. But prior to that, I had a 17-year relationship with my first wife, who was the mother of my first son, Paul Jr. And when I said to Penny, I said, honey, I can't be in a monogamous relationship, and I don't ever want to have to lie to you, and I don't ever want to have to cheat. I just don't want that kind of relationship with the person who is my partner in life and who my intention is to spend the rest of my life with. And she said to me, you can have as many wives as you want, as long as they cook, clean, contribute to the bottom line, and don't talk too much. So she said, the more of those you can find, then go for it. And so having lived on that agreement and had my chance to really express my love and project my anima and deal with it. When you find out that you're making love to your mother, it only takes about a year and a half, and you figure out what's going on if you're paying attention.
Right.
You're like, oh God, here she is again.
Yep.
Same nagging shit again, same complaining. And you realize, oh my God, I'm doing it again. I got to shut that projector off. But my point is, I see how Penny and Angie support each other and how they nurture Mana. And Mana loves both of his mommies. Angie, of course, is his real mother, but Penny has such a deep, loving relationship with him. And he's so happy to go places with her. And, she can take care of him, and he hooks on to her just like more kind of like Sex at Dawn talks about tribal relationships, and there's an old saying, it takes a tribe to raise a child, and it's very true. And there's so much Christian suppression of women and so much patriarchal control of women. And I hear so many complaints from women about how shitty their sex lives and how boring their husbands are and how it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And they really just want some intimate nurture, and they want someone who has more capacity to listen to them and not try to fix them all the time. If you could have a wife that you may or may not have sex with, how might that be more supportive of you than having another husband if you could have two of them?
Well, I just want to start by saying I think that we did used to have women that would work together. That's how we're naturally supposed to be. We're supposed to be a community who we're supposed to help each other. It's a sisterhood. And that feels to me way more natural. I don't have young kids anymore, so I don't really feel like at this point in my life I would need something like that. Although I did have a woman who is really wonderful, who helped us out when the kids were younger, and that was amazing. I think a lot of women are very depressed because they are doing it all themselves, and we're really not meant to do it all ourselves. This is something that's very unnatural. And so, I'm truly nourished by my sisterhood. So I have different groups of women that I get together with, and we're just women, we're just women together, and we do women things like talk a lot, and stuff like that. And so because I'm in a house full of men, I pretty much, I need that. I need that for nourishment. It's fun for me. It's joyful. I also have a group that we do a sisterhood group every couple weeks online. And it's just really great to have a group of women that you can gather with and talk about things with and relate to and connect with on things that they can connect with too, and they can feel like they could listen and hold space for you there, because that's something that I think we're missing in our society. Is the women have kind of been separated, and our true power is when we get together. We have to, I think traditionally women would get together on their own and men would get together on their own, and uh, that was pretty powerful because we need that time where we're just together and we're learning from each other, or we're holding space for each other. It helps us as men and women to get to know ourselves better that way. Like, I never really knew how to be a woman, when I was younger. I think that was the whole point of like what we talked about. I never really learned how to be a woman. So now in my midlife, I'm learning how to be a woman, and it's so much fun, and I think that's another part of why women have health issues, is because we've never really taught how to be women,
Yeah.
and so it's liberating. It's very freeing when you can be yourself.
So you mean watching the mob wives or the baseball wives on television is just not doing it for you?
No.
I mean, the fact that those shows even run makes me want to
Yeah.
vomit. I mean,
I
that's
can't watch
where
that stuff.
how many indicators do we need that our cultural programming, our religious ideology, and all the ways we have to suppress ourselves is turning us into a culture that is trying to fill the emptiness in its heart and its sex organs with shoes and toys and gadgets and cars and fake status symbols. And I mean, I look at this and I go, my God, no wonder we have such a need for psychotherapy today. And no wonder there's so much medical drug and recreational drug abuse. And no wonder people are running off to the jungles in droves to use ayahuasca and take mushrooms to try to figure out who they really are. I guess what I'm saying is I'm really glad you're doing the work you're doing, because the fact that those kind of television shows that obviously cost multiple millions of dollars to create and market are staying on the air means that we are in actually quite deep trouble psychologically.
Yeah, I mean, and it's perpetuating this competition between women, which is a very small part of being a woman. I mean, women are meant to connect with each other. We're meant to support each other and be
Absolutely.
there for each other. We're not meant to compete against each other. That's not, what we're supposed to be doing. But that is portrayed in media, and so then it creates this narrative, and that's where kids are learning now too. They're learning from media. It's what they're learning. They're learning how to be adults from media. So
Yeah.
that's why I think we have to get back to some of the old ways.
Well, the truth is they're not learning how to be adults from media. They're learning
Well,
how to
yeah.
be spoiled, rotten kids in adult bodies.
Yeah, unless they have parents that can really intervene. But
Well, that's
yeah.
that's why Steiner schools make it clear right up front.
Yeah.
We don't want your kids watching televisions or using tablets because it messes them up.
Yeah.
And if you do that, they almost always become uncontrollable in class, and we can't work with them. So, when we look at, and there's a book I've got right now, I'm studying it, called Hooked. I can't remember the author's name. It's a strange name, Isle Near or something, like I Near or something. But boy, it shows you exactly how all the corporations and the app makers and phone makers have invested huge amounts of money into the science of exactly how to brainwash people and keep them hooked on all these gadgets. And it's quite a powerful read. My research into brainwashing showed that the Catholic Church had brainwashing mastered by the 8th century, and they've been perfecting it ever since. And the corporations have certainly torn a page out of their playbook, and they're taking it even further. And it's really damaging to our children. We're losing ourselves in destroying nature by building endless shopping malls, fast food joints, and living in an illusory life of reality television that doesn't prepare us or educate us for real life.
Absolutely. And that's why it's more important right now, more than ever, to become your own authority and to learn how to listen to yourself, like listen to your own voice. Don't be so easily influenced. And sometimes you have to, like as an adult, I've got to get off social media. I've got to get off all those devices to get clear on some things. I got to go out in nature, spend some time in nature, So wherever you're thinking in nature, I think it's going to be pretty close to what your true self is. I kind of is the conclusion I've come to. I think it keeps me pretty clear,
Yes. And we need to protect it before it's gone.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to skip forward one because we've been going for a while. I just want to, there's just a couple of quick questions to close out. Allison, I'm curious, what is your belief in God, and how does that belief help or hinder your ability to see and understand what is transpiring amongst women and human beings in the world today?
Well, I think that nowadays I don't think of God as like this guy in the sky with a white beard. I think of it now. If I were to have an image of God, I practice that more as looking at the 13 moon goddess archetypes, because they truly will teach you about your shadow and light sides, and each one is very unique and kind of shows a certain side of being a woman, really, because that's really where I'm at right now. I feel like I need to learn more about myself, like these kinds of things that I didn't really get to learn when I was younger. So for example, like I'm in this group and we focus on a different archetype each month. And one of them is the Lady of Communion, which is one that I really resonated a lot with. And because I just felt like I have embodied her all my life, like that I've been her. And so, looking at some of the shadow signs of her, like powerlessness, overzealousness, blame, unclear motivation and intent, overachieving, righteous indignation, are some shadow sides that I've had to work on, right? And then looking at the light side of her would be intention, spiritual warriorship, impeccability, authentic presence, integrity, self-empowerment, those kind of things, abundance, independence, resourcefulness. So that's kind of a way to play around with it. And there's also symbols that you can, and colors and stuff that you can embody to bring that energy more into your reality. But I think those kinds of things for me right now. And I think also I see that I'm the creator of my reality at this point. So maybe that makes me God or goddess. I don't know. But that's kind of the perspective I'm coming at right now, and seeing it that way.
That's quite healthy. How does that help you deal with what you see transpiring amongst women and human beings in the world today?
I think that you're saying, how does it help them, or how can it help them? You're saying?
How does it help Allison deal with what she sees happening among women and in human beings in the world today? How does that way of relating to yourself, how does that spiritual relationship with God as you, the creator, and God as the 13 archetypes of the moon goddess, give you the strength or the vision to help understand the challenges of women and human beings in the world?
Well, I think it gives me a more of a sense of calm and confidence and trust, really, in myself. And
That's excellent.
Yeah. And only then can I do anything for anybody else unless I have that.
Amen. What references could you give for others that want to learn about the 13 moon goddess archetypes?
Well, that's a good question. I would say there's a great book that my coach recommended to me called The Mists of Avalon. It's a really big book, but it talks about the priestess and kind of the particular priestess in Avalon. It's about that story and about I haven't read the whole thing. It's very big. It's a very big book, but it's very interesting because I think that if we could learn more about some of the priestess archetypes and kind of some of the things that were practiced before the mainstream religion came into play, and think about kind of where we came from, that would be, I think, really healing for a lot of people, and it's been healing for me. But I would also say, like, astrology is really great too. I'm a little bit of an astrology buff, but I think that you could check out, hannahbeer.com is my coach, and she could definitely steer you in the right direction for that. That's where she leads a group that does the 13 moon goddess archetypes. And right now I'm just kind of in the beginning stages of learning about all this, but you could certainly contact her to find out also more information about that. But
how do you spell her last name?
It's Bier. It's hannahbeer.com.
Is it HANA or NNA?
HANNA. I can send you the link as well.
Yeah, do that. And we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
The other thing that's very helpful for this, although plenty of Christians have a knee-jerk reaction due to their false information and misprogramming, is tarot. Tarot is linked directly into astrology and many other native traditions and numerology, and it's phenomenal way to look at the archetypes. You've got many of them are very helpful. Tarot number 2 is the High Priestess, which is the inner life, the feminine inner life of ourselves, which is being alone with yourself. Archetype 3 is the Empress, which is the loving mother. You've got Tarot 14, which is Temperance. You've got Tarot 17, which is the Star. I mean, there's a lot of great feminine archetypes in tarot, and Christians think that's the work of the devil, but the work of the devil is what's happening on television and to nature and in corporate enslaving and fascism.
Yeah, it's because it's feminine. That's why they think it's the work of the devil.
There you go. Exactly.
That's my theory. But I also have another book I can recommend to your audience, the Gaia Codex, and I think it's kind of wonderful. It really talks about a lot of the things that it's kind of hard to explain, but it talks a lot about a lot of the things we were talking about here with the priestess and archetypes and this thing called the Gaia Codex, which is basically, kind of a rule book for life or something like that. I guess it's just kind of like rules for life, what Jordan Peterson wrote, but from a long, long time ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to my interview with James Wanless.
No.
I think that it's a mind-blowing interview. He's the creator of Voyager Tarot, and Voyager Tarot is stunningly beautiful, and he studied cultures all around the world, and each card gives you descriptions from many different cultures. So you can look at it from geomancy, you can look at it from alchemy, you can look at it through shamanism, you can look at it through, a whole bunch of things. Numerology. There's like 12 different ways to look at each of the cards in his deck, and he got rid of all the medieval Christian bad news and converted it, stuck with the archetypal numbers, so the major arcana are the same, but he brought the mythology of it up to date for the modern era, and it is absolutely a phenomenal piece of work.
Oh wow!
And you don't take but 5 minutes listening to this guy. He's the epitome of the wise old man archetype.
Oh, I'll definitely listen to that one. That sounds great.
And he is very funny.
I bet.
Well, what a great interview. Before we go, what is the focus of your clinical work at this time?
Well, the focus of my clinical work is I see a lot of people one-on-one physically in the gym, and then I work with them online in the nutrition component. So I focus a lot on training people in just moving better, but specifically running, hiking, climbing mountains, having better core stability. I've been doing some handstand workshops as well. So really like the intricacies of more integrated movement is what I help a lot of people with. Some people come to me with back injuries, and I help kind of take them after they do physical therapy and help them integrate into getting stronger and more functional and stuff like that. Which is, I love doing that stuff. It's so much fun for me. And then also the other part of my program is what I provide for my clients, either online or in person, is building your food and fitness foundation e-course, and that's included in my coaching, and they can have access to that. And it's a self-study course that they go through, and we have a monthly online nutrition and lifestyle coaching session that goes with that, so that I can help them implement the changes that they're making with really learning about their body, learning how to nourish themselves with the right foods. And it's just basically there's no specific diet. It's just an education on how to eat, really, and then as well as a foundation of fitness that you can start with for better mobility, healthier spine, stronger core, and a breathing module as well.
Sounds good. Where can people find you and access your services, or whatever else you'd like to give access to sharing for the podcast listeners today?
Well, mainly pureenergypdx.com is my website, and you can find everything there. They can book a free coaching call with me. That's 30 minutes, and we can talk about their struggles and their wants and how I can help them moving forward. As well as they can always listen to my podcast, which is called Integrate Yourself. And I interview a lot of people, including you, Paul, that are in the industry and that are alternative people to health. And I just like to give people and share with people a lot of options on how they could keep themselves healthy. There's not really any right or wrong. It's just there's so many things that they can do. And so I just like to share with people like different ways that you can do that, and you can make it your own that way.
Perfect. Any closing comments before I give you a metaphorical hug and a kiss goodbye?
Oh, I just want to say I'm so grateful for you, Paul, and I'm so honored that that you let me come on your show. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to share you. You spent a lot of time studying with me, and one of the questions I was going to ask is how you're applying the Chek Institute teachings. But just from hearing what you're offering, it seems like they've served you.
Yeah, I think that is the foundation for everything I do. It's just that the Chek principles are like, it's the ground floor. It's the floor work that everything is built upon. So if you don't have that, I mean, there's so much nuance in the simplicity of it all. And so much we can learn from that. So it's just fantastic, and I'm glad that I met you years ago and took all your classes. And I think actually I ended up taking every class besides the first one. I think every class you taught actually when I was taking
it. Oh, that's rare.
Yeah.
So you got to hang around with the sometimes stern teacher, and the guy that wanders off the beaten path, but trusts that you'll get the points you came to get.
Absolutely. I learned from the best.
Right on. Well, hey, thanks for sharing all your love. It was a great exploration today. I really hope that all of you listeners got some medicine and found some joy and some harmony with what we're sharing, and realized that we're both really just genuinely interested in sharing our life experience and our wisdom with you and inspiring you to grow. And if something either of us said triggered you, then that was a gift, because if you've actually healed, you don't get triggered. So wherever you got triggered, if you're still here, then your soul's saying, hang in there. The medicine is here, and it's a gift to all of you. I always tell my students, don't believe a word I say. Go out and try it for yourself. And I think you would agree with that too, wouldn't you, Allison?
Absolutely.
Lots of love. Thanks for everything today, Allison. And blessings to you and your husband on your honest journey of love.
Thank you, Paul, and blessings to you too, and lots of love, sending love your way.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Allison Pelot. You can follow Alison on Instagram at Pure Energy PDX, on Facebook at Pure Energy Wellness, or on her YouTube channel, Pure Energy Wellness. Subscribe to her podcast, Integrate Yourself, through Apple Podcasts and Blueberry. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living 4D Podcast, or on his YouTube podcast channel, Living 4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and the Chek Institute's blog at chekinstitute.com/blog.